The Senate will come to order. I ask everyone present to please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the absence of clergy, let us bow our heads in a moment of silent reflection or prayer. Reading of the Journal.
In Senate, Sunday, March 13, 2022, the Senate met pursuant to adjournment. Journal, Saturday, March 12, 2022, was read and approved. On motion, Senate adjourned.
Without objection, the Journal stands approved as read. Presentation of petitions. Messages from the Assembly. Messages from the Governor. Reports of standing committees. Reports of select committees. Communications and reports from state offices. Motions and resolutions. Senator Gianaris.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. On behalf of Senator Skoufis, I wish to call up Senate Print 1735, recalled from the Assembly, which is now at the desk.
Secretary will read.
Calendar number 460, Senate Print 1735 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the general business law.
The bill was passed.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Gianaris, Kruger, Ort, Stewart, Cousins, White. Ayes 59.
The bill is restored to its place on the third reading calendar.
For the following amendments.
The amendments are received and the bill will retain its place on the third reading calendar.
Mr. President, there's a privilege resolution at the desk, Senate Resolution 2081 by Leader Stewart Cousins. Please take that resolution up and read its title only.
The Secretary will read.
Senate Resolution 2081 by Senator Stewart Cousins in response to the 2022-2023 Executive Budget Submission to be adopted as legislation expressing the position of the New York State Senate relating to the 2022-2023 New York State budget.
Senator Gianaris.
Mr. President, I expect there's going to be extensive debate on this resolution. For that debate, our Finance Chair, Senator Kruger, will be responding for the majority. We are ready at this time to begin the debate.
Thank you, Senator Gianaris. Senator O'Mara.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Gianaris. Senator Kruger, look forward to some explanations of the Senate one-house budget that we have before us today. I guess on the resolution for a moment, please, Mr. President.
Senator O'Mara on the resolution.
We have received this Senate one-house budget resolution about 7 p.m. Last night. It's 2 p.m. the next day now, so it's 19 hours for our staff and ourselves to digest what is being proposed as a nearly $230 billion budget, increasing spending overall by about 8%, increasing the state funds portion of that spending by over 11% year to year, on top of what was in excess of a 10% increase in this current year's budget year to year. That's over 20% increase in just state funding over the years, and about a 22% increase in overall funding, including the federal money that's come in for us. This spending, in my opinion, and I think from our side of the aisle, is unsustainable. It's unwarranted, and it really doesn't, the resolution proposed, that we'll get into some of the subject matter here, doesn't respond enough to the issues of the day, of everyday New Yorkers, of the overall affordability of living in New York State by New Yorkers. It does nothing to end the exodus of New Yorkers from New York State, as the majorities in both houses for years now have worked to massively increase state spending and further stifling economic activity in New York State, when we should be looking to do everything we can to foster a better business climate in New York State, so that businesses can provide the opportunities to New Yorkers that we all need to meet our everyday costs of living, which continue to escalate disproportionately in New York State. aside from what is now an 8% inflation rate nationally, we're adding to that in New York State by going with an 11+% increase of spending in New York State. I will note, I believe, and we'll ask some questions on this in a moment, that there are not tax increases in this proposal, and that the majority is pursuing the continued the reduction of the middle-class income tax rate that had been put off for a few years. And that's important, I think, to go towards the affordability of New York State. Beyond that, there isn't much here, frankly, for everyday New Yorkers to meet their budgets and their households, to provide for their families, and to have the economic opportunities of a job in New York State and the dignity and self-respect to go to work and earn a living to provide for themselves, as opposed to sitting back and waiting for further and further handouts from state government and federal government. So with that, Mr. President, if Senator Krueger could yield for a few questions, starting out at least on the financial plan.
Certainly. Senator Krueger, do you yield for a few questions?
Yes, I will, Mr. President.
Senator Krueger yields.
Now, Senator Krueger, can you explain to us how this level of increased spending of over 10% last year, over 11% this year, is sustainable to New Yorkers and to New York State government, using up surplus funds we have now, using up federal assistance that's come for COVID? When that money's gone, how is this increased spending going to be sustained?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the sponsor, my colleague for the question. And I think I need to put it in the context of what we're doing with the One House, as he raised some issues about the context that he perhaps was misinformed about our One House. The things he was laying out, Mr. President, that he hopes for all New Yorkers are exactly the things we are trying to do in this One House budget. We have heard the working people, the people of New York State who've come off of 2 years of COVID, the people of New York who've come off of years and years of underinvestment in the programs and services they need, crying out for help. And we are attempting to respond to them in this budget. So we are investing in childcare so that mothers and fathers can go to work and be assured that their young children are taken care of, are helped with education and protected so that they can go and earn more money for themselves. We are investing in desperately needed home care services that at the other end of life, as you're older or as you're disabled, you're in a situation where you can't even get home care services, so that a family member may have to give up a job in order to stay home with you, and you may not get the care you need at all and may be trapped alone. Meanwhile, the wage rates for home care workers and other low-income workers in the healthcare professions are crying out for more people to come into these fields. We need people to work in these fields, but we need to be able to pay them a wage that even provides them enough money to pay for a car to drive to their job in upstate New York. And right now the wages are so low they can't even afford to take the jobs. We hear the people of New York talking about needing to make sure that our public college system is invested in at the level that assures our young people are getting the education they need to compete in a 21st century labor market. Do you know that New York's young people are going to other states' public university systems because they can't get what they need in our CUNY and SUNY systems, because we have failed to underwrite them at the level they need to be underwritten to ensure New Yorkers can graduate, get jobs here, stay here, and raise their own families here. That's what we hear people crying out for. So we are putting significant new investments in the infrastructure for care for people, for jobs for people, and of course for the fundamentals of infrastructure in a very traditional sense of making sure that we have roads and bridges and buildings that are going to hold up and ensure that we can get to and from the jobs, get to and from the cities and towns, invest in our public transportation system, invest in all the things that the research shows drive people and businesses to New York and keeps them here. So I'm very, very proud of the investments we are attempting to make through our One House budget bill. And yes, to answer Senator O'Mara's question, we are spending a bit more money than the governor originally laid out, and we are changing how she would be using some of the funds because we believe there are better uses. But we do believe this is sustainable, particularly because investing in job creation, investing in our small businesses, investing in our higher education, investing in our child care means there's more opportunities for more people to go back into the labor market or join the labor market and, of course, become taxpayers into the state's revenues into the future. So he's correct that we are increasing the operating spending by about $9 billion in the executive budget over what the governor recommended. But in fact, we all agreed, including my colleague, Senator O'Mara, that there was an additional $1.2 billion in revenue consensus offsets, and that we are including that and spending that. We all know that the governor held $2 billion for a pandemic assistance account. We're programming that into issues that we think are the critical things to spend money this year. We are fast-tracking casinos a year early so that we anticipate $3 billion in casino licenses. We are decreasing the rate at which the governor proposed debt prepayment. We're not paying our debts, I assure you, we are. But the governor proposed a fairly dramatic spin up of prepaying debt. And so we reduced that from $3 billion to $1.5 billion, and that gives us another $1.5 billion. And yes, the governor also had a robust proposal to increase the amount of our reserves in a rainy day fund, which she proposed at approximately $3.2 billion, and we're reducing to $1.8 billion. Am I getting that right? Excuse me. She proposed a $5 billion rainy day fund contribution, and we are reducing that by 3.2? By 1.8 billion, leaving 3.2 billion to go into the reserve fund this year. We're also hoping that our federal government will continue to follow through on a number of the commitments that they have verbally made but not completed the legislative assignments on. So we also want to make sure, in an era where there are New Yorkers at risk of eviction and homelessness, that there are landlords who can't be paid because there isn't the money in their tenants' pockets to pay them. We are hoping very much that the federal government will make good on a commitment to increase the amount of money they are sending us to help landlords who are owed money and tenants who owe money, and everybody wants them to be paid. We just need the money to do so. So I think that's the general outline of the answers to your questions, Senator O'Mara.
Thank you, Senator. Through you, Mr. President, if the senator will continue to yield.
Senator, do you continue to yield?
Happily.
Senator yields.
Just to clarify some of these numbers that we've opened up with on the overall. Last year's budget increased spending year to year by over $11 billion, and that was the significantly largest increase in the prior decade of state spending. Would you agree with that, Senator Krueger?
I believe that numerically that's correct, and that was heavily due to a massive surge of federal revenue just at the last few days before we completed last year's budget. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. President, if the senator will continue to yield.
Do you yield, Senator Kruger?
Yes.
Senator Kruger yields.
Well, I would submit that the lion's share of that increased spending last year was due to the insatiable desires of these majorities to continue to spend. And last year you had Governor Cuomo over a barrel with the investigations that were going on and took full advantage of that situation to increase spending by $11 billion. This year, in addition to that new spending of $11 billion last year, we're looking at, while Governor Hochul only increased the budget by 3.2% in her proposal, with a spending increase of $3.7 billion. You raised that by $9.1 billion, so it's $12.8 billion increased spending from year to year. Is that correct?
About right.
How much?
Senator O'Mara, are you asking the sponsor to
Through you,
yield?
Mr. President, if the sponsor would yield.
The sponsor
to the
yield.
question.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
How much of the federal pandemic relief, which was, I think, about $12.7 billion, how much of that is being utilized to balance this budget?
$2.4 billion.
And then how much of that has been spent already? How much of that $12.7 billion has been spent already?
Senator O'Mara, are you asking Senator Kruger to yield?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Do you
Mr.
yield,
President.
Senator Kruger?
Thank you. I believe about $4.5 billion has been spent already.
For you, Mr. President, if Senator Kruger will continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Of course.
The sponsor yields.
Of the, I forget, so I'll just ask this question, Senator Kruger, of the budget surplus funds that we have, I forget the exact amount off the top of my head right now, you mentioned it before, how much of those surplus funds are we spending in this year's budget?
Continuing to make deposits into the reserve fund, so we're doing $3.2 billion into the reserve fund. So the governor's executive budget would have put $5 billion in, and we're putting $3.2 billion in.
So we're putting it, if the senator would yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
I do.
The sponsor yields.
Through my numbers that I have in my head, and they're rough, they may not be exact, so correct me if I'm wrong, that we have somewhere in the range of a surplus revenues in our budget of $10 billion, and we're only putting 3.2 of that into reserves for future years, so we're spending close to $7 billion of that in this year's budget.
Through you, Mr. President, if I could ask Senator O'Mara to clarify where he thinks the $10 billion surplus is? Asking if you could ask Senator O'Mara to clarify
Senator
where
O'Mara,
he
could you-
thinks the $10 billion surplus is.
Certainly. Senator O'Mara, could you clarify the question, please?
That, through you, Mr. President, that $10 billion figure is a combination of federal pandemic funds that have come in and increased revenues throughout the fiscal year above what was it budgeted.
Can I please ask him to rephrase the question again for us, the original question?
Yes, through you, Mr. President. Senator Kruger, year to year, from last year to this year, in this year's current budget, what is the anticipated revenue surplus?
projected? So when we end this year, how much of additional revenue will we expect to still have over what we had earlier anticipated? Is that what the question is?
Yes.
So we're ending. Thank you, Mr. President. While you can always label things differently, we believe that the governor originally said there was $5 billion that she would put into reserves, and now we're reducing that to $3.2 billion to go to reserves. So that would be the surplus.
Through you, Mr. President, if the senator would yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, I will.
The sponsor yields.
Senator, the figures I have are that revenues exceeded expectations by about $4.5 billion in the prior fiscal year, and they're on track about the same. So roughly $9 billion over last year and this current year.
Year plus the future year. So the year we're ending plus the future year, and that's approximately $9 billion, close to $10 billion above what was originally projected, right, from different revenues. We are spending some in the coming year in our proposal, and we are still having $3.2 billion to go into reserves. Plus the 5 from this year.
Can you clarify that?
There was projected $10 billion over the 2 years. The governor is putting $5 billion away from this year that we are ending, the 21-22 year. And then she was also planning to put $5 billion in the 22-23 year, but we are only leaving her $3.2 billion for an additional reserve.
Through you, Mr. President, if the senator would yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Of course.
Sponsor yields.
Of the that then $2 billion that you're taking away from reserves that Governor Hochul had put in, what is that going towards?
That is part of the $9 billion of increased spending that our One House budget lays out in totality. So it's not that the $2 billion is specifically for item A versus item B. It is money that we are defining as available for increased expenditures that are quite broad and quite transformative across any number of important issues.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. President, through you with the sponsor, continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, I will.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you, Senator Krueger. Now, out of those surplus funds that you're allowing in the governor's executive budget to go towards reserves, can you outline where those monies are going to be put into reserve and for what purposes? And is this One House changing the funds from what the governor had proposed?
Governor proposed $5 billion going into reserves in the coming year. In our analysis, she's only left with $3.2 billion to go into reserves. The reserves are not defined as for specific items. Thank you, I'm learning more every day. So there are statutory reserves and non-statutory reserves. So there's 920,000 of statutory reserves, 920 million. What's 920,000? It's petty cash. 920 million in statutory reserves, and we aren't touching that. That will continue to go so. And then the remaining reserves will go into the general reserves. The economic uncertainties reserve.
Mr. President, can the sponsor answer another question?
Will the sponsor yield?
I'll do my damnedest to try. Yes, sir, Mr.
The
President.
sponsor will do her damnedest. The sponsor yields.
Of that fund, what is the outline for uses of that money in that fund?
For which fund? The statutory reserve or the economic
Economic Uncertainties Fund.
You know, you hit another bad period, tax revenues go down, another pandemic hits, the federal government changes hands and stops sending to the states, et cetera, et cetera.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, I will.
The sponsor yields.
Of the money going into reserves, how much of that is going to pay down the debt that the state owes to the federal government for the unemployment insurance fund that the state borrowed, and it now has a balance of about $9 billion still owed to the federal government?
So neither the governor's proposal for the reserves nor our proposal for the reserves specifies that any of it goes back to the federal government for the UIB borrowing, but there is $600 million within our budget proposal to help repay the interest. Is it the interest or the actual underlying? So the $600 million goes to helping with the underlying debt. And just to remind everyone, when we borrow from the federal government to pay out UIB, as we did during the pandemic because we had so many unemployed people, technically UIB is not a on-budget or general fund expenditure. It is a separate program paid for by businesses. So yes, this has to be paid back, hopefully at the lowest or zero interest possible. Hopefully the federal government may decide to allow us to discount some of what we owe them, but it's actually not a budget item per se. It's a separate item.
Mr. President, will the senator yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Senator Krueger, we have seen quite a few other states in the nation that racked up pretty incredible unemployment debt to the federal government during the pandemic that have utilized their pandemic relief to help pay down that debt so that ultimately businesses and employers don't have to pay that back over a series of years for that debt. Why are we in New York choosing a different course of action, and why is it appropriate to, over the period of this lingering debt for however long it lasts, why should we be requiring employers to shoulder that burden from the pandemic, which will further tighten their businesses and their ability to hire people to work?
We actually, in a separate section of our One House, are moving to delay some of what they would otherwise owe. That's $600 million. And you ask an excellent public policy question about why do different states make different decisions with their money. So one of the answers, I'd have to go back to earlier decisions in the state. We actually don't, per business, collect as much from businesses for unemployment costs as many states. We're behind on having increased our scale of what we collect. So it left us with less money than some other states, but it's still the fundamental question of who is obligated to pay for unemployment benefits. And the design and model has been that businesses are responsible for paying for unemployment benefits. The workers pay into it when they're employed, and the state holds the funds and distributes them. But I don't think that this state has had a public policy debate about changing the rules of the road so that unemployment benefits are not an obligation of business, but rather an obligation of the general fund or the taxpayer. What I am very proud of is that we are investing a large amount of money within our One House budget in helping the smallest businesses with their debts and to help them stay open or even to reopen when they've been forced to close, to get workers back to work so that they're building up the tax revenue and actually paying into the unemployment fund, which will help it bounce back more quickly.
For you, Mr. President, if the senator would yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I'm not suggesting that we change the method of how unemployment is paid for in New York State in a regular environment. We've come through a 2-year pandemic that had significant unanticipated layoffs, causing people to go into the unemployment fund that were no fault of that business. It's no fault of the business either cutting back or laying off employees. It has to do with the pandemic that built up this $9 billion fund. And the majority in this House thinks it's reasonable to use only $600 million of in excess of $10 billion available and $12.7 billion in pandemic aid, most of which has not been spent. Why that a greater effort is not being made in these exigent circumstances of the unemployment insurance, not changing the way we account for unemployment costs going forward, but for this period of time of the pandemic that specifically created this $9 billion debt. Why are we not making a greater effort towards paying that down?
I don't think there's $12 billion left of federal pandemic aid. I don't know where that number came from. But, one second. How much? So I do think it's still partly an ideological disagreement, Tom, Senator O'Mara, sorry, that we're trying to make sure that the money that we have available to spend is invested in creating jobs for New Yorkers who need to go to work, who need to make sure that their children are cared for so that they can go to work, as opposed to making the decision to help businesses repay something they owe under the law, while we are trying to smooth out and decrease the rate at which they have to pay it back. But if you look at the history of unemployment benefits, you have your good times, and then you have your times of recession. And during times of recession, you end up spending down a lot more unemployment, and you, thank goodness, can turn to the federal government for loans to make sure that those benefits are paid. And then over time, businesses repay the fund and everybody moves forward. So the UIB, since it was created, has actually proved to be a model that it does, over time, adjust for the good times and the bad times, or I suppose biblically, the fat cow times and the thin cow times. And I have confidence that we will do the same again.
Through you, Mr. President, if the senator will continue to yield.
Does the sponsor continue to yield? Senator Kruger yields.
Senator, can you point to any other period of time in our UIB program, and where we have had anywhere close to this number of job losses due to not just a pandemic, but to anything that was other than unrelated to a specific business. Now, where in our history, this seems to be unprecedented to me, the job losses and the debt that we owe the federal government that is unrelated to economic normal conditions. So, you know, why is this not being treated differently?
We would both need to go back and look up the history of UIB and where the unemployment rate has been at different times in our history to know the answer. I certainly don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, the most recent reference is the 2008-10 economic collapse of much of the world economy, and I think we ended up owing $5 billion back to the federal government at that time, which we were able to pay back under our normal rules of the road. I'm going to guess that the one previous to that, it's almost every 10 years that you end up with some kind of recession period, but I don't have that data memorized. Perhaps one of the staff can do that homework for us and get back to me during the course of this debate. But right now I'd have to say, for as long as we've had UIB, we've had a situation where we had our good times and our bad times that were caused by all kinds of reasons, including war, and we've been able to bounce back.
Through you, Mr. President, if the senator will continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield? Yes, I do. The sponsor yields.
Shifting gears off of that topic a little bit, even though I would certainly disagree with you that this pandemic was not, it was and is unprecedented in the history of the UIB, and therefore should be treated differently rather than just requiring employers to pass that cost on and therefore stifle hiring, in my opinion, and the creation of those job opportunities that New Yorkers desperately need. In this budget resolution that's before us, what is the increase in anticipated revenues to New York State from year to year?
So we're showing an 8% increase in annual growth under taxes and a 3.2% all funds receipts annual growth rate.
Okay, if we are, through you, Mr. President, if the senator.
Does the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
What is the dollar amount of those two figures you gave me from year to year?
For our growth in taxes, it's $109,109,257 million, and for our total all funds receipts, it's $234,302,000. Sorry, we're growing? No. All funds, excuse me. I'm sorry, Tom. Total all funds receipts will be $234 billion compared to this year, which was $220 billion, so a 3.2% growth. No? Close. What, Tom? I don't want to be on the record reading you the wrong numbers, so something was slightly off.
I appreciate clarifying these numbers as to.
Thank you. So I'll stick with, all right, I'll stick with the tax revenue, but the Total all funds receipts this year, $227,138 million. Next year, our projected $234 billion, 302 million. Steve, those numbers better.
You, Mr. President, if the senator will continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, sir.
The sponsor yields.
So for my, I guess, evaluation of those numbers, and I think I'm reading from the same page as you now from the financial plan, there's about a there's about a $8 billion estimated or anticipated increase in taxes in New York State, and an increase of about $7 billion in all funds revenues. Those are significant. That is significantly less, I would say, than the proposed spending increases in this Senate One House proposal. Once the surplus monies are expended throughout this year, the coming year, and the year after that, how does the Senate majority intend to continue to sustain that level of spending without the shortfall between revenue increases and spending, and therefore then without the federal aid that will probably be gone within 2 years?
For this year, projected taxes are still higher than what we're expecting to spend, so we're fine for this year. We try to do out-year projections. We always end up changing them, but the expectation is that we would continue to see some tax growth the year afterwards, an out year. That is an out year where the governor's also now proposing putting another $5 billion into reserve funds. Here. That's always another question for us. But we actually do feel that at the rate of tax growth and the rate of the money that we are expecting to spend if we had our one-year budget, one House budget, that we actually would still be fine for this year and at least the year after. And again, things change rapidly in government. So I should point out what you already know, what we all know. This is an aspirational budget where we hope we can accomplish as much of this as possible. We need to go into negotiations with our colleagues and with the governor, and we will see where the final numbers end up. But we're feeling pretty comfortable about our ability to meet our responsibilities to the people of New York and meet our aspirational targets.
For you, Mr. President, if the senator would yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, I do.
The sponsor yields.
I would agree, Senator Krueger, that these are certainly aspirational numbers. I believe they're unrealistic and unsustainable over the years, particularly with the uncertainty we have going forward with our economy with 8% inflation and many economic pundits talking about recession now. That will certainly impact the revenues and receipts of the state going forward. What do we have in this one House aspiration to provide for this risk of a recession and a drop in revenues for all of these recurring billions of dollars expenses that are built into this?
I've mentioned several times we are putting money into a reserve fund that has already grown by $5 billion this year and would grow by another $3.2 billion in the coming year. We live in a tricky age. I agree with Senator O'Mara. I remember standing here 2 years ago when we were dealing with the budget, and literally the word COVID and pandemic had just first been uttered, and everyone realized that suddenly everything might be changing. And we had no idea what the impact would be on our budget, and the governor then asked us to give him an extraordinary powers both over emergency situations and to the ability to borrow money. I think we gave him 11 billion supplemental emergency borrowing power at the time. And then a year later, we were still literally moving into the final weeks of negotiating budget, still in panic about what would we do if the federal government didn't come through with the committed but not yet delivered funds. And then suddenly they came through with about $13 billion. And overnight, we were shifting our math and our realities. And then over last year, where a few weeks before the budget was passed, we had no idea whether we would have enough money to get through the year or not. And we were talking about all kinds of emergency responses, none of which were pretty. And then the money came, and then we started taking a look, and our tax revenues were skyrocketing. And we couldn't even figure out why. So that even during a time of extraordinary difficulty in our economy for large numbers of businesses and people, some people and businesses did extraordinarily well and have triggered larger tax revenues than we imagined. So based on the last couple of years' experience, I feel that none of us have a great crystal ball about what happens 2 years out from now. And what I do know is New York State is very good at making adjustments when it has to, even very large adjustments. And so I think as a state and as a government, we want to fight for the best that we can do. We want to both use hope and intelligence to invest in the kinds of programs and services that will strengthen our families, strengthen our businesses, make us more competitive in the world we live in, and hope it all goes the right direction, and know sometimes it's not going to go that way, and we're going to need to pivot fast. But if the last couple of years in New York State has taught us nothing else, it's taught us both our endurance and our ability to pivot fast.
Thank you, Senator Krueger. Mr. President, if the senator will continue to yield.
Does the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Just wrapping up here, one more specific thing I wanted to get into before I hand it over to my colleagues to continue in various subject matter areas. An area that has been highlighted both nationally, regionally, and in New York State has to do with manufacturing. And, you know, the impacts of the pandemic on global supply chain, our inability to manufacture and provide the products that we need right here within our state, but particularly within our nation as a whole, not being overly dependent in these times. What in this one-house proposal is there to benefit manufacturers of New York State and to foster further manufacturing activity in New York State? I would note that I think about 6 or 7 years ago, we eliminated the corporate franchise tax for manufacturers in New York State. I was a strong proponent of that, and that fell short because it only ended up applying to Subchapter C corporations and not so-called pass-through entities such as partnerships, LLCs, Subchapter S corporations were left out, and they make up about 75% of all manufacturers in New York State. I don't see any proposal in this one-house resolution that focuses either on that, to eliminate the corporate franchise tax to the pass-through manufacturing entities, or anything else in here that's going to help us foster and bolster our manufacturing in New York State, which are good jobs, but also a matter of security interest to provide for our needs when we may not be able to get it from around the globe.
So, I agree, we want to do more to help our local manufacturers and to support manufacturing because Senator O'Mara is absolutely right. The supply chain realities were laid open and left this country raw when we couldn't build our own products, when we couldn't make the things we needed, when we couldn't get them from anywhere else. So this conference and in their One House, we are very focused on making sure we're investing in small businesses because small businesses actually do create the jobs in our economy and can move more quickly and respond more quickly. So we establish, the suspension of state taxes. Oh wait, excuse me, did you want? We're reducing the gas taxes, which was particularly important for trucking and manufactured products to reduce the prices. So we're lowering the gas taxes by an estimated $648 million. Right. We are allocating an additional $200 million to the Small Business Seed Funding Grant Program. Instead of taking money from existing programs, and expands the list of businesses that can apply to this program, as well as allowing those who lost businesses due to COVID pandemic to get some assistance which they can use to restart small businesses. We expand incentives to install renewable energy like thermal and geothermal and solar products in our homes and our businesses, providing significant tax credits to cover those costs. And the truth is, the faster we are moving to a green economy, and the faster we are moving to things that deal with climate change, the more new manufacturing opportunities there are and will be in our state. In fact, Tom DiNapoli, the state controller, recently put out a report saying that we had already created 1 million new jobs in New York State thanks to our investment and shift to green environmental standards and green energy. So the opportunities for job creation, for manufacturing of products you and I might never have heard of even yet, are enormous in the future. And I think that if you review our complete One House budget, you will see we are heavily, heavily committed to investing in climate change and environmental changes that will absolutely help our manufacturing and our small businesses.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. President, I guess on the resolution, briefly.
Senator O'Mara on the resolution.
I'd love to spend the next hour and a half on the Green New Deal, Senator, but I have colleagues that want to ask questions, and as that's going to cost New Yorkers in excess of $300 billion, and those are numbers by the proponents of these changes. With all due respect, with your response to my question on what we're doing for manufacturers, specifically, there's nothing in this One House budget proposal to specifically help manufacturers in New York State. I've been a strong proponent of manufacturing since my time in the legislature. I believe it's where our #1 economic development focus should be, because so many other industries and jobs grow off of the manufacturing sector to provide the opportunities that New Yorkers need so that they can afford the outrageous cost of living in New York that this state legislature continues to foist upon them, making New York State more and more unaffordable and adding to the exodus of New Yorkers. And we're doing nothing to foster that base of manufacturing that should be the bedrock of any economy, but particularly here in New York State, to foster the spin-off businesses and jobs that come with that. And with that, I will yield my time to my colleagues, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator O'Mara. Senator Gallivan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the sponsor, appropriate member of the majority, yield?
Senator Janaris.
These questions will relate to the health part of the budget, which will be answered by Senator Rivera.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. President. First area I would like to ask about is the Medicaid global cap that we know was instituted a number of years ago to limit Medicaid growth to the 10-year rolling average of the medical component of the CPI, which is calculated about at 3% right now. The governor, in her budget, proposed a different formula for the Medicaid global cap. The Senate One House, though, rejects the extension of the Medicaid global cap of the governor's proposed extension of the Medicaid global cap. Does the Senate One House put forth an alternative proposal?
Through you, Mr. President.
Senator Gallivan, are you asking the sponsor to yield?
I thought I asked that, and yes, I do, Mr. President.
Senator Rivera, do you yield?
I yield.
Just for the record, Senator Gallivan, that's all. Thank you.
I yield. And through you, Mr. President, it's a pleasure to see you, Senator Gallivan. The quick answer to your question is we, in the majority, believe, and I have certainly been saying this over the last couple of years, that the creation of the cap was an artificial construct that served the prior administration more than it was more of a messaging tool than a budgetary one, and we want to do away with it. And so the current proposal that we have in front of us, the current resolution, gets rid of the Medicaid cap altogether.
Will Senator Rivera, Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
I do.
Senator Rivera yields.
So if I understand correctly, the current proposal gets rid of the governor's proposed cap on Medicaid spending. Is there an alternate proposal to ensure that there is some type of check on the spending in the Medicaid program?
Through you, Mr. President, I would say that there never was such a control. The global cap, as it was referred to by the prior administration, was not a real thing. It was referred to as a real thing. It never really existed in statute. It existed in the press releases and the press conferences of the governor, but it did not actually, it served as a tool so that they could actually put money where they wanted to and keep money from where they didn't want it. And Mr. President, I'll actually go a little further, and I will just say a general comment as far as the budget that I'll just say the One House resolution that we have in front of us is in reference to a budget that was already a pretty good one. And the reason for that, Mr. President, was that as opposed to spending, as my colleagues will certainly continue to say, I believe that a lot of what's happening here is an investment. It's an investment in a lot of areas that have had seen disinvestment and austerity for way too long. So as it relates to this, Mr. President, I would say that we believe very strongly, and this is why it's in our One House budget here, that certainly the increase in Medicaid that the governor approved, that the governor proposed in the budget is a correct amount at least to start from, but that a cap is no longer necessary, and so we excised it completely.
Will the senator continue to yield?
Senator Rivera, do you yield?
I do.
Senator Rivera yields.
Thank you for the response, Senator Rivera. So how does the Senate One House, as it relates to Medicaid spending, ensure accountability in the spending, to ensure that we limit fraud and waste and any abuse, and that the spending that we are spending for Medicaid is indeed appropriate?
Mr. President, that we have the state, as I'm sure that you're aware, has an agency, the OMIG, which actually specifically deals with investigations of fraud and malfeasance in the Medicaid program. And they have been fairly successful at times to find such things. So we believe that that already exists, and we fund it. I forget at what level exactly. You might have actually accepted. We accepted what the governor proposed in the One House in her budget proposal, because we believe it is important to fund OMIG going forward.
If I can move on, Mr. President, and ask if the senator would yield a question about the Health Care Transformation Fund.
Senator Rivera, do you yield?
Absolutely.
Sponsor yields.
So the budget, the executive budget transferred $1 billion from the general fund to the Health Care Transformation account, but yet the governor provided no details on planned disbursements, which would mean that the executive had unilateral authority to spend $1 billion in unspecified programs. The question is, how does this one-house budget allocate that $1 billion from the Healthcare Transformation Fund, excuse me?
Mr. President, it was actually excised from the one-house budget proposal.
Will the senator continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr.
The
President.
senator yields.
We know that many of our hospitals across the state are stressed. We have a number of different categories that historically the state has provided funding and support to hospitals. Does the Senate One House direct payments to hospitals struggling with financial losses that do not currently meet the definition of distressed?
Through you, Mr. President, one of the issues that has existed in prior years, and one of the reasons, by the way, why I had to turn to this amazing group of folks who I will identify later, because they are certainly responsible for what's in here, is that there's a lot of these funds that have very similar names. So I always have to check exactly which ones it is that we're talking about. In this case, what I would say is that in past years, there have been, the actual categories are kind of hard to define. We actually have an issue with defining distressed hospitals. We, in this one-house budget proposal, actually attempt to do that. We attempt to have clear definitions of what distressed hospitals are, because we recognize, Mr. President, through you, as my colleague says, that there are hospitals all across the state, not only downstate, but across the entire state that are in trouble. And I would reiterate, Mr. President, that a lot of it has to do with the fact that over the last decade, the past administration kind of led with austerity, and there was more disinvestment than anything else. And so that I would say that what we do here is try to send resources to the hospitals that most need it, and we'll certainly work along with all of my colleagues to make sure that we can identify which institutions those are and make sure that we can support them accordingly.
Senator, continue to yield.
Senator Rivera, do you yield? Senator Rivera, do you yield?
I indeed will.
Senator Rivera yields.
Is the senator able to, at this point in time, share with us how the One House can or will define distressed as it relates to hospitals?
Mr. President, and this, by the way, is like, it's why you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, because they obviously know it off the top of their head. No, see, exactly. All good people right here. But through you, Mr. President, we actually define it in terms of the population that is served by that particular hospital, by a certain percentage of Medicaid population, and their plan to actually, and as far as our budget, as our one-house proposal states, the way that it would be actually, the $1 billion that we actually allocated in our one-house would be dispersed based on this definition of distressed hospitals, based on Medicaid population, but based on a plan to be approved by the Speaker and the Majority Leader of the Senate.
Senator, continue to yield for a question.
Senator Rivera, do you yield?
I will.
Senator Rivera yields.
Along those lines, and the senator alluded to this, the various definitions that have been created over time, we have sole community hospitals and critical access hospitals. They've also been hit very hard by the pandemic. How does your budget increase funding to these hospitals or help these hospitals?
Mr. President, we actually, as I stated earlier, the amount that we've allocated in the one-house budget proposal is $1 billion for these types of hospitals, and it would, depending on, and the definition that we currently have in our proposal would actually include all of the, potentially include the institutions that you just mentioned.
Will the senator continue to yield?
Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Sponsor yields.
So if I understand correctly then, we had these different definitions in the past, and I'm asking based on the different definitions. So now, as we move forward, a distressed hospital and a sole community hospital and a critical access hospital will all be treated the same as far as being provided relief with the $1 billion allocated towards this.
Mr. President, the answer is that they would not be treated, all of the institutions will be treated according to what their needs actually are. So they will all have access to the fund, but certainly those institutions that are more in need are more likely to receive more funding.
Will the senator continue to yield?
Does the senator continue to yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
The senator yields.
How does this one house or program that the senator describes, how will it actually determine which hospitals are in which need? What parameters will be used to determine the need? And then once that's done, how will the money be allocated?
Mr. President, the way that it will work is that we will work along, meaning we, the Senate majority, as well as the Speaker, work along with the Department of Health, based on the definition, as I've stated earlier, that relates to the amount, the percentage of Medicaid population. And by the way, I should linger on this for a second. It is clear that if that there is a Medicaid patient that goes to a particular healthcare institution, then that institution will get reimbursed for the services that are provided, depending on the payment modality. But obviously, Medicaid rates, as everybody knows, are exceedingly low. So any institution that has a high percentage of Medicaid population will be an institution that is in distress. I certainly can speak for St. Barnabas Hospital, which is in the middle of my district. Over 95% of the folks that go there are Medicaid patients, and therefore this is an institution that is constantly in distress. So that is as far as the definition, and as far as the determination of how it actually get to whom it will go to, based on the need, we will work, the Democratic majority and the Speaker's office will work along with the Department of Health to determine where exactly this money needs to go, and we again it will correspond to the need that is particular to each institution.
Or continue to yield, Mr. President.
Does the senator continue to yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
The senator yields.
I have yet one more category. Rural hospitals. Struggle for many of the same reasons, but also some additional reasons. Where do rural hospitals fit as it relates to these other types of hospitals in need that we've discussed?
Mr. President, it actually, regardless of where the hospital is, certainly, first of all, I should tell you, I certainly recognize. I've had the opportunity to visit a few rural hospitals across the state. I believe maybe some of them have been in your district, and certainly I've learned a lot about the way that these institutions struggle in different ways than the ones that do in urban settings like the ones that serve my community. So we were obviously saying if there is a high need, that we want to make sure that we give them resources. And that's precisely what that $1 billion is there for, to make sure that it can be directed to institutions, whether they be rural, urban, or suburban, that have high needs.
Senator,
Well, apparently that person didn't believe me. No, I mean it, bro.
will the senator continue to yield, Mr. President, for a question?
Does the senator continue to yield?
I do, Mr. President.
Senator Rivera yields.
Senator mentioned Medicaid reimbursements that we all know are very low. For hospitals, my belief is, while in the past several years we had talked about their reimbursement rate being at 67 cents on the dollar, now the various hospitals and their organizations represent the fact that the reimbursement rate is 61% on the dollar. We know that the executive's proposal and the one house reinstated a 1.5% cut from the prior administration, and if I'm not mistaken, added 1% in the way of reimbursements. That moves it up to 62%, and it really raises a question about, you know, how is this sustainable and how are our hospitals going to be able to survive? The question is, does the One House address the significant disparity in the funding as it relates to reimbursement versus cost? And if not, what can we do as a body going forward to help our hospitals so that they're getting reimbursed for the services that they're providing all of our constituents?
President, this is a key question, and there's a key question that, something that I stated earlier that I'll repeat and I'll reiterate as many times as necessary. We have a lot of catching up to do after 10 years of austerity across the state. Not only as it relates to hospital or the Medicaid system, but that's the one that we're talking about today. And what the governor proposed and what the One House budget proposal does on top of what the governor proposed is a first step in the direction of actually solving that. One of the things that is currently being discussed relates to potentially special rates for particular hospitals that are high needs, to have enhanced Medicaid rates. There's all sorts of conversations that are happening right now about the stability of these institutions in the long term. And that's something, unfortunately, we can't fix overnight. So I would say that the fact that we went back, as you mentioned correctly, that the governor's proposal actually brought up the cut that had happened last year. It brought us back to 0, and then it went up 1%. There were conversations about whether we should accept that, whether we should go for more. We agreed to accept the 1% increase, and there's a lot of other stuff that we did, as I mentioned, some of the capital funding, some of the distressed hospital money that we talked about, et cetera. All of these things are about trying to go back on what has been at least a decade of disinvestment and austerity for institutions that serve the most vulnerable across the state. So this is what we are seeing in this One House proposal, and there's a whole host of other things that I hope that you will ask about or one of your colleagues will ask about that we feel incredibly proud of, and we think are first steps in actually getting us back to institutions that, again, serve the most vulnerable, that can actually be stable and don't have to come back to the state every couple of years for rescue.
Mr. President?
Senator Gallivan?
I have, I think, just one more question. I'd like to ask many, many more questions, but we are limited in time. But I do have one more question if the Senator would continue to yield for
Senator
that.
Rivera, do you continue to yield?
I think I will yield once more. Yes, sir.
The senator thinks he will yield.
So the
Sponsor yields.
Senator has talked about, among other things, but we focused a lot on these hospitals in need, distressed, old definition or new definition, community hospitals, rural hospitals, critical access hospitals. And while it likely includes more than that, we focus on $1 billion that's set aside, which will be welcomed by these hospitals, and no question about it. All of us represent constituents across the state that have been affected by this. And it's very likely that not one of us that has a hospital in our district hasn't heard from the hospitals and the problems that those hospitals have. And of course, those districts or those hospitals are located in most every district across the state. Those that are represented by a member of the majority, a member of the minority. And we have heard from the senator that as we move forward with this $1 billion, that the plan now is that the majority leader, Speaker of the Assembly, will discuss this with the governor and ultimately allocate that funding. The question I have is, given that members of the minority represent hospitals and there's a direct effect on their community, what role will the minority play in allocating the spending over the course of the next fiscal year?
I believe that this is obviously something that I absolutely recognize. I remember when I became a member of the majority and the chair of the Health Committee, it was very clear to me that the job was actually to govern for the entire state and to, obviously, as it relates to the healthcare system, we serve every New Yorker, regardless of where they live, what party they're from, ethnicity, immigration status, et cetera. And so we have to try to make a system that serves all of them. So what I can tell you is that the definition that we created, we believe actually includes, it includes a set of criteria that can be implemented across the state regardless of where that hospital is. And what you have, through you, Mr. President, that I give a commitment to you and to my colleagues, that certainly not only myself, but most importantly our majority leader cares deeply about the entire state. And that the process, which will be transparent, will rely on the definitions that we create. And ultimately, I should say, obviously, this is a one-house budget proposal, right? We have not made it to the final budget, but we will fight to include this, or as much of it as possible, this is the process, right, in the final budget, because we want to make sure that we actually create a set of criteria which can include which can include any hospital or any entity across the state that has these needs, and then we are committed to make sure that we have a transparent process to make sure that the resources go to where they are needed. So I believe that that through the definition that we have created and the process that we are putting forward, that we will be able to do that, again, in a transparent manner. We will make sure that any institution that has the needs across the state, regardless of where it is, receives the funding.
I'd like to thank, Mr. President, I'd like to thank Senator for responding to the questions. That's all that I have for now. I will yield my time to my colleagues and ultimately speak later in explaining my vote.
Thank you, Senator Gallivan. Senator Oberacker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I plan on asking just a couple of quick questions. The first subject would be the expansion of the essential plan that covers the undocumented populations.
Senator Oberacker, are you asking the sponsor to yield?
Health area of the budget, I'm sorry, yes.
So in the health area, you're asking the sponsor to yield?
I'm asking if the sponsor would yield.
Senator Rivera, do you yield?
And the sponsor yields, yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. It's still my first time here, so give me a yes, so thank you. So with that, the proposal provides coverage on the essential plan for undocumented individuals, those ineligible for the federal financial participation in the basic health program on the basis of immigration status. This is with a household income below 250% of the federal poverty line. The Senate One House bill expands the essential plan to undocumented immigrants, and under the current law, permanently residing under color of law populations. My question, if the senator would yield?
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. Question one is, if we pass this proposal, why would the federal government ever agree to cover the expansion and federal matching funds for the essential plan, Child Health Care Plus, and Medicaid, if we are showing that we are willing to cover the population anyway without their participation?
President. I'm glad, Mr. President, that this is something that is being brought up. And first, and actually, just for the record, Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Oberacker, who referred to these folks as undocumented people, so undocumented persons. Some of my colleagues sometimes use other terminology that is not human. So I'm very glad that you did that, sir. Now, the answer to the question is this would be an extension of the essential plan to an undocumented population, right? These are folks, this would be only state money. So there would be no federal match. It is currently, right, this is not funded at the federal level. If there's services that are provided to undocumented people, it is not funded through federal money. But we believe, Mr. President, that it is absolutely essential to do, and I'll give you a couple of reasons. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, these undocumented people are still people. The fact is that they will get sick. The fact is, Mr. President, they are getting sick. And as opposed to someone else who might have access to primary care, they have to wait until they have to go to the emergency room. And maybe they just ignore that pain that has been in their stomach for the last 4 or 5 days. They'll ignore it. If it goes away, they won't actually go to the emergency room because they figure it's It's putting myself at risk. It is potentially incurring costs, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact is that there's emergency Medicaid money that is already being used, state money, that is being spent on the care of these individuals. By extending the essential plan to these folks, we will actually, and they will actually have primary care, which will allow them to be able to have the type of coverage, Mr. President, that many of us take for granted. And among other things, secure for themselves primary care potentially, which means that they will be able to identify conditions that are chronic earlier. They will just be healthier. And this will not only save us money, Mr. President, but also make lives better for those individuals, their families, and the communities that they're in.
Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, I will.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. So what is the plan should the federal government ever eliminate funding for the essential plan because of this expansion?
Mr. President, I would like the senator to clarify his question because I am unaware of a situation in which the federal government has decided to, because I believe, if I understand correctly, that what he is positing is that if there is an expansion of something that is for which strictly state funds are used, that the federal government might see this as some sort of insult and therefore say, we're not going to cover the federal share of folks who are eligible for federal funds? I don't understand the question, Mr. President, if he could clarify.
The senator, having yielded, is asking you to rephrase your question, Senator Obaraker.
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. Thank you. So as a businessman, the metrics as I understand them. If New York moves to cover all the undocumented under the essential plan, the federal government has no reason to participate, maintain, and expand federal funding for other health insurance programs because we, as the state, are showing that we are willing to cover the population anyway with state-only funding. So the question becomes, through you, Mr. President, why would the federal government then ever continue if we are showing as a state that we're willing to fund these individuals?
President, I feel that I'm still a little confused by the question, but I'll try to answer. This is a population that the federal government has already told us they will not cover. Matter of fact, another part of our One House budget proposal relates to the expansion of Medicaid for birthing people for up to a year after they have given birth, which in our version, not in the governor's version, but in our version includes undocumented folks. And yet again, this is actually something that we're using state funds for. So I'm not sure that I understand the question. If the federal government is not going to give us federal share for a particular population, they're just not going to give us federal share for a particular population.
I'll move on, if that's okay. I believe I've got enough, and we can speak offline, I think, more appropriately than here today. So thank you for that answer, Senator. Through you, Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Does the sponsor continue to yield?
Absolutely.
The sponsor
Great.
yields.
Okay. The sponsor's memo for the original legislation stated that the budget is neutral. How, if you can help expand upon that, how is that possible?
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor could produce this, I'm sorry, not the sponsor, apologies. If Senator Obaraker could produce the memo that he's referring to, because I'm pretty sure that in none of we know that it is not budget neutral. As a matter of fact, it is absolutely budget not neutral, I guess is the way to say it. It obviously is an expenditure, but I will once again say that it is opposed to an expenditure. It's actually an investment. As we're saying, we are expanding the essential plan to a population that currently has no access to health insurance unless they can pay for it out of pocket, right? Unless they are wealthy, in which case they can pay for whatever they want. But if we're talking about folks who are within 250 of the federal poverty level, 250% of the poverty level, we are talking about a population that obviously is in need of some level of care because, as I stated earlier, they are people. They will get sick. So The memo, I am sure, would show that. Matter of fact, see, this is, again, why you surround yourself with good, smart people. Bottom, fiscal implications. You might be referring to it, if you're referring to a memo that is not the current one, which I'm looking at, then if you would show it, but the memo that is currently for Bill S1572, fiscal implications, the cost of the state to accomplish this goal is estimated to be approximately $345 million. The state will be saving close to the same amount in emergency Medicaid spending, and eligible individuals will be paying small premium amounts to contribute to their coverage. Thank you so much. So in other words, the memo that we currently have clearly establishes a fiscal. So I'm not sure which one, through you, Mr. President, you're referring to.
Clarification on that, Senator. I will take that with me. Through you, Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Senator Barrett, do you yield?
Indeed.
The senator yields.
So as a follow-up, are there estimates of how much this will cost in the future moving forward?
The amount that we have in our one-house budget proposal, 345 we put in there, right? The amount that we put in our one-house budget proposal is an amount of $345 million, which amounts to what we believe will be about 46% of the total number of folks. 46,000, apologies. There are a total, Mr. President, right now, according to our analysis, or according to the analysis of folks who are supporting this piece of legislation, there are a total of 154,000 potential eligible people. In other words, folks that fit within the criteria, don't have a legal immigration status, and fit within the criteria as far as federal poverty level. Of those, as we know, no program has 100% use. Even if someone is eligible, the idea that 100% of the folks who are eligible for any program, that has never happened. And according to our best estimates, we're thinking that about 46,000 people of those 154,000 will avail themselves of this program, which comes to a cost of $345 million. But I'll say again, this is almost as much as we will be saving because we're not going to be using it on emergency Medicaid anymore. And I would remind everyone that providing folks primary care is, and making sure that they use it is actually a great way to save money in the long term. Because if somebody has primary care, let's say somebody has diabetes, has asthma, has any other types, has cancer, any of these types of ailments, Mr. President, can be identified if someone has access to primary care as opposed to having to rely on emergency care. So that means that not only their lives will be better, but that we will save money, because as opposed to having somebody having to deal with, let's say, God forbid, an amputation because of diabetes that has not been diagnosed, being able to diagnose it, take care of it on a regular basis means that those folks, not only their lives will be better, but we will save money in the system overall. So even though I couldn't give you at this particular moment, outside of the $345 million that has been allocated in our one-house proposal, we could certainly do an out-year type of analysis and provide it to you, sir. Thank you, sir. Absolutely.
Through you, Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Does the sponsor continue to yield?
C.
The sponsor continues to yield.
Changing up a little bit now to an area that, of course, is near and dear to my heart, EMS funding. So some of the background on Part F of the HMH bill proposes modernization to emergency medical services, including training programs. However, rural communities, of which I represent a large portion of, are still suffering from a shortage of EMS workers. So through you, Mr. President, does this budget in any way help increase the number of rural EMS?
Through you, Mr. President, we believe that, first of all, I'll refer to my earlier comments as far as 10 years of disinvestment and austerity means that we can't flip the boat around in just 1 year. We're certainly going to try. And what we did in our House budget proposal is that as it relates to emergency medical services, not only did we add $1 million to what the governor had allocated for training purposes, but we also accepted some of the changes that we believe will indeed not only provide stability, but potentially give us an opportunity to have more emergency medical technicians across the state.
Thank you, Senator. Through you, Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, sir.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. Is there any consideration into making EMS an essential service? And if so, why isn't it proposed in this budget?
One of the things that we are certainly doing is we're accepting a redefinition of emergency medical services that is in Part F, hold on, Section 7. Again, you hear that? Section 7? I'm telling you, man. It's good to have these folks here. Which has not been done in over a decade. And we believe that this actually will go a long way towards kind of centering this in the way that it is essential in different parts of the state, certainly in like rural communities. In Section Subdivision 1 of Section 3001 of the Public Health Law, as mentioned in Chapter 804 of the Laws of 1992, which is what Section 7 is, emergency medical service means care of a person to and from and between person's home, scene of injury, et cetera, and it specifically includes community paramedicine care. So we believe that this definition, which again has not been changed in quite a while, goes a long way towards doing just what you feel needs to be done in that regard.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, would the senator continue to yield?
Does the senator continue to yield?
I continue to yield.
The senator yields.
Senator, thank you so much for that. I'm encouraged to hear you say that. Anything since 1992, I think, should be looked at more readily and under a microscope. So, again, thank you. Through you, Mr. President, does this budget increase Medicaid rates for EMS service? And do you believe that the Medicaid transportation rates for ambulance services are adequate for upstate New York and rural regions?
Through you, Mr. President, the across the board, the uncut, if we're going to, the restoration, that is a technical term. The uncut is not a word. The restoration of these funds is across the board, which includes everything related to Medicaid, including transportation. And then we added up 1% on top of that. So in other words, we accepted the governor's proposal to do 1% above that, and that is across the board.
Mr. President, I would like to thank, I'm finished with my questions. I would like to thank Senator Rivera for his detailed questions, and I too will reserve my speaking on my vote at a later time. I would like to now take my time and extend that out to our next, who do we have coming up here?
Senator Gianaris. Thank you, Senator O'Brien. Senator Gianaris.
Thank you. Mr. President, just for planning purposes, I want to notify members, we do intend to honor the agreed upon 2-hour limit on the debate on this resolution. There are 8 additional members who want to debate this bill, and less than a half hour until 4:12, which is the 2-hour limit. We've been through 3 members, so if you figure out the math, that's you're averaging a half hour per member, and you have 8 more members, which is not going to make it. So please act accordingly. We don't want to cut people off, but if we reach the limit, we will.
Thank you, Senator Gianaris. Senator Palumbo. Senator Rivera, if you can explain your...
30 seconds. Jorge Rivera, Jamie Somm, Donovan Borrington, Carolyn Sheridan, Jonathan Lang, Chris Higgins, Lakia Martin, Anissa Martinez, Alexander Neuer, and Tony Cargarabal. Those are the folks that are smarter than me that did this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for the recognition of our staff, Senator Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I make an application for a credit for Senator Gianaris and Rivera's time?
Senator Palumbo with a 5-second credit.
Would the sponsor or a colleague yield for some questions on public protection, please?
Senator Krueger will be yielding. And Senator Krueger, Senator Krueger is in a position. Do you yield, Senator Krueger?
I do yield.
Senator
Thank you,
Krueger
Mr.
yields.
President.
Thank you, Senator Krueger, and I'll move as quickly as I can. Does this Senate One House include any provisions or amendments or changes to the bail reform statute?
No.
Will you yield for another question?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Senator, does this One House contain any provisions that would allow judicial discretion with respect to bail reform?
No, this is a budget document, so we didn't do policy issues here.
Certainly. Would you yield for another question?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Well, I appreciate that, Senator Krueger, but I'm now going to ask you about the policy that's in this One House bill, if you don't mind, okay? Because we do that quite often here. And with respect to the clean slate section in public protection, I believe it's Part A and AA, there were some changes made where, and if I'll just read the section quickly, the Senate modifies the executive proposal to seal criminal records 3 years after the expiration of the maximum sentence for misdemeanors and 7 after felonies. The Senate advances language that would immediately seal records 3 years after the release from custody on misdemeanors and 7 years on felonies. So the clock now starts, based upon this One House proposal, upon someone's release from custody, and maybe an example would help. Someone's sentenced to 5 to 15 years, for example, on a manslaughter second degree. The clock under the governor's proposal would start at 15 when they're released from parole. This bill, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this proposal would have the clock start at 5 years in that example. Is that accurate?
Try to get this correct. Under the proposal we have in the our One House, the sealing can begin after they leave prison, but they are not going to be completely sealed until the 15-year mark.
Okay. Would you yield for another question?
Does the sponsor
Yes,
yield? The
I
sponsor
do.
yields.
Okay, thank you, Senator. And that clarification was important, I believe, because in the executive budget, since it didn't start until you're released from probation or parole, this would made that somewhat ambiguous because since it starts, it's just told until the end of their release from supervision. Is that accurate?
Sealing cannot occur when a person is on probation, parole, or community supervision. So it does not get completed until any and all of those are completed.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. Would you yield for another question?
Does the sponsor yield?
Certainly.
The sponsor yields.
Is this going to apply retroactively to current convictions? Thank you. Would you yield for another question?
Does the sponsor yield? Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Can an individual take advantage of this sealing provision more than once on multiple convictions? So, for example, as we've seen within a lot of the news stories recently, some people have 20, 30, 40 criminal convictions. If they're outside of 7 years, are all of those sealed?
No cap on the number of convictions, so there's no cap on this. Although it sounds like we wouldn't get around to sealing anything until hundreds of years later, does it?
Well, would you yield for another question?
The
Yes, of
sponsor yield.
course.
The
Thank
sponsor
you, Senator.
yields.
So by way of follow-up, is there a cumulative count that it's 7 years for each charge, or is it just 7 years from the most recent case?
So it's 7 years from the most recent felony conviction, so a new conviction puts you back in square one.
Okay, thank you. Would you yield for another question?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Okay, thank you, Senator. So it would be just for newer ones, more recent ones, but all the old ones would be wrapped up and sealed, just so I'm clear, correct?
You need to have no felony convictions in 7 years. So it's not like they start the count for sealing one, but then you get another felony, but you still get to get sealing on the earlier. that doesn't work that way. So, okay.
Thank you, Senator. And would you yield for another question?
Does
Just
the
one more
sponsor
area.
yield?
Yes, I do,
Sponsor
Mr.
yields.
President.
Thank you. And I guess just to clarify that, that would be, it wouldn't apply to old ones, only new ones, is what I understand it to be, and I think that's what you just explained. My next question is regarding the unlawful discriminatory practice section. That Part AA would make it unlawful discriminatory practice for any person, agency, bureau, corporation, or association to inquire about whether in any form of application or otherwise, or to act upon adversely to the individual involved in a conviction which is sealed. So this prohibits anyone, and my question to you is, anyone, agency, does this also apply to schools? Does it apply to law enforcement? Because I believe the executive budget at least carved out law enforcement, but school districts, I know under the current law, you can ask if someone's been arrested in very limited circumstances, like for physicians, for lawyers were asked, for certain law enforcement positions. So does this eliminate that entirely? Can you clarify that for me, please?
If the job you're applying for, let's say as a teacher, requires a background check, the background check will show the record. But if you're not applying for a job that does require background checks, then your record is sealed for those types of jobs.
For one more question, please.
Senator Kruger, do you yield for another question?
Absolutely.
Sponsor yields.
Senator Kruger, in that situation then, if someone's applying to be a bus driver for a school district and all of their convictions are sealed, are you saying the school would have access to those? Say, for example, for DWI convictions?
So a bus driving job has review through the DMV system, and the DMV system would continue to show these convictions.
Do you yield
That's
for
just
one
what I'm
more
being
question?
told.
I think I
believe her.
understand that.
She's very believable.
Right.
Senator Kruger, do you yield for another question?
I do.
Sponsor yields.
So without belaboring that point, so that if it's not found through the DMV system, then ultimately that's something that you would not be entitled to in the event you're looking for someone as a driver, correct?
School bus drivers require a fingerprint check as well, so they would still have access to those records in addition to what the DMV system collects.
Section, if I can. Ask you one more question,
Are
please.
you asking the sponsor to yield, Senator Palumbo?
Yes, I am, Mr.
Will
President.
the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I have here in the governor's budget, which I guess was otherwise adopted based on the language of the One House, in any civil action, an official record of a conviction that has been sealed pursuant to this section may not be introduced as evidence of negligence against any person or entity that provided employment, contract labor, services, volunteer work, etc. With respect to that section, so in the event someone hires someone who is, for example, abusive to children or otherwise has sealed criminal convictions, and then ultimately they do it again to an employee, in a negligent hiring case, you are not allowed to admit the evidence of the prior conviction that the employer disregarded, and for example, say it even came through by way of a newspaper story. That's inadmissible as a result of this language. Can you clarify that or tell me if I'm wrong?
Try to get this one right. The employer could not be found or charged in a civil case because if they went looking for records that were not available to them, they did not know anything about this employee, hence they don't have a liability. But if the employee is brought up in a civil case, then those records are available to whoever is bringing the case, and it can be used against them if they lied about anything and for the actions that they took.
We're short, so I'm going to leave some time for my colleagues. I have no further questions. Thank you for answering.
Thank you very much.
Senator Borrello.
President, I have a question on mental health. Will the sponsor yield?
Will the senator yield for a question on mental health?
They will.
Senator Kruger yields.
Thank you, Senator Kruger. I stood here a year ago when we were discussing this chamber watering down, strengthening Kendra's law in last year's budget. And if you may know, Kendra Webdale was a friend of mine. She grew up in the little town of Fredonia where I grew up, and it rocked our community when she was pushed in front of that subway train. And I said on the floor, I hope this never happens again. And tragically, we stand here a year later, and we have Michelle Go, who died in the exact same manner with a person who should not have been out on the streets. And we've seen an increase in mental health violence here in New York State in this past year. Very tragically, we're standing here again. And I'm looking at this One House budget, and we were going to renew, in the governor's budget, Kendra's law for 5 years. And the One House budget, the Senate One House, only renews it for 1 year. The Assembly is keeping it at 5 years. Why would we only renew it for 1 year?
I think we're keeping it for 1 year because we recognize it's not a perfect law and that we need to do more things. And so we didn't want to do a 5-year extension and just say we're done for 5 years. Because we, like you, believe we need to be doing more. What we did learn in researching Kendra's law is it is very rarely used in a situation as the example you gave recently from New York City and some of the many other tragic, violent cases involving mentally ill homeless people. In fact, Kendra's law is disproportionately used by family members who go to court to get an AOT. Is it AOT? Mm-hmm. Thank you. And not used at all when it comes to the issues of homeless people without any connections with their families or with any kinds of community institutions. So we really do believe that we not only need to continue the protections that we already have in Kendra's law, but that they're not adequate, and we need to figure out some changes in our laws, specifically when it comes to mentally ill people who have, again, I need to say for the record, Mr. President, I do not believe that most mentally ill people are ever going to be violent. My conference does not believe that most mentally ill people are ever going to be violent. We're talking about a sub-universe of people who, particularly perhaps when they are not on meds that they need, because they have no services being offered to them or no assistance, no health care, that these are the population we need to actually be coming up with better and more effective models. And those are not putting them in jail. They are not throwing them in an emergency room for 24 hours and releasing them. This is talking about getting them actual psychiatric services and care with residential facilities, because again, we're talking about disproportionately homeless and mentally ill. So there are all kinds of program models. We don't believe Kendra's law addresses the issues we're seeing in New York City right now, and I'm told in several other places in the state. So we don't want anything to sunset. We just want to focus more on it rather than doing a 5-year extension and thinking we took care of everything, because that would not take care of everything.
Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Senator Kruger yields.
I appreciate that answer. Unfortunately, New York State has summarily shut down institutions that could actually help people. And now our streets have become mental institutions. And while it's a small percentage of people, keep in mind, crime in general is a small percentage of population, but it still rocks our communities. And so I don't know that that's necessarily the right answer. But you brought up AOTs. We're trying to do things to strengthen our ability to ensure that people that have mental health crisis can be held. Yet, we are taking out the ability for a physician to actually testify at an AOT hearing to ensure that those people are kept. So why would we do that?
allowing Zoom testimony, is my understanding.
Here for the last 2 years, but now we can't do it.
Well, I think there's a concern about a I'm sorry, through you, Mr. President. I think there's some concern about psychiatric evaluation when you've not actually met or dealt with the person. But I just want to clarify the first point you made. We are putting in $220 million more for psychiatric beds and supportive housing beds. 20 million? Let's try 20 million for 200 psychiatric beds, which is not 220 million, which is the number I would prefer personally. And there's a commitment by the state to revisit reopening psychiatric beds that they have closed over the last number of years. You know, I don't think you and I are very apart on this issue at all. In my city, we believe we have 1,000 fewer residential beds for people with psychiatric illness now than 8 years ago. And so you wonder, why are there so many people on the streets with nowhere to go, suffering so painfully and putting others at risk? Because we took away the places they used to be able to go. So we need to reinvest in psychiatric beds and to have various options for people who are in different places and have different needs.
Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to
Does
yield?
the sponsor yield?
Yes, I will.
Sponsor yields.
Senator Krueger, you're right. We aren't far apart on this, but it's the actions that I'm concerned about. $20 million to create 200 beds. I lost 20 in my community alone just in the last 2 years. So I think it's woefully inadequate. So why are we not strengthening that? And in fact, why aren't we using Senator Savino's bill, 8508, as a model to do exactly that, to invest in and strengthen our mental health laws?
Put in her new bill, circulating it, and we still have time to explore that before the end of session. Thank you, Senator Savino.
President, I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you, Senator Krueger.
Thank you, Senator Borrello. Senator Rath.
Mr. President, will the sponsor yield for some questions on elections?
Does the sponsor yield for questions on elections?
Sorry, Mr. President, of course.
Senator yields.
Thank you. I will be brief, and I'll try to be seated. This budget allocates an additional $10 million for BOE assistance, the One House proposal. Is all of this intended to aid those offices who are implementing early voting requirements across New York State?
Moment as our voter person shows up. Big guns for you, don't worry. Did I hear you correctly? $10 million specifically for ask is for what it's being used for? Do you know? No.
The second charge, timeout.
You win the prize for how many staff can we find help me? And the answer is no, it's for whatever the local boards wish to use it for. It might be early voting, it might be other things.
Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield and you can restart the clock?
The clock restarts. Does the sponsor yield? The sponsor yields.
Thank you. Are you confident that this $10 million is sufficient for our Board of Elections to meet all these new requirements?
Question. We gave them more money last year. We're not clear that they've spent it all, and it probably varies by location. But we are optimistic that it's more than was going to be there for them, and that every dollar helps, so that It should help them move along. I know some bought new machines, some are still looking to buy new machines, some had fewer problems with the earlier voting, some had more problems with the earlier voting. So one thing I've learned is that elections operate pretty differently depending on what county you're talking to, which is why we didn't mandate the 10 million for any one specific activity.
Thank you. Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. We have heard from a lot of boards of elections. They're really struggling with resources. They're struggling with training. They're struggling with staffing. So the additional resources are important. But one of the things that's a real problem is our smaller counties complying with all these early voting requirements, all of these new mandates that are being passed down. So is there any money that's earmarked specifically to help out our smaller and our more rural counties who are struggling to comply with these mandates?
For any purpose, I know that the State Board of Elections has talked about doing more online training and unification of training so that you don't necessarily need the same specialists in every county if you can do online training of your workers. But as far as the other examples you gave, it's not clear to me that there is a general sense of what everybody ought to be doing.
Mr. President, would the sponsor yield for a question or two on energy?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This One House proposal has several large aspects to it concerning the energy sector. But many of these proposals do not address the concerns of long-term affordability for energy consumers in New York, both residential as well as industrial and commercial consumers. What is the justification behind the modest suspension of motor fuel taxes proposed? And is there any particular reason why the One House stops short of suspending all fuel taxes?
That, oops. You faked us out is what the question was going to be. Although I do want to just go back and point out also on local election issues and other local issues. We also increase AIM funding to our localities by $210 million, which hopefully will allow them to have some additional money to cover unique local issues for themselves.
And get rid of the sales tax intercept.
And we're also sales tax intercept, which is another $250 million. So we are definitely within our One House trying to make sure that we are increasing the amount of state revenue going back to our counties and localities for them to use it as they prioritize, which I think is a real victory, probably, that everyone would agree with here. Now, to go back to your question about, thank you, I didn't forget, I just wanted to get that in.
Good, thank you.
About increased energy costs. There is an assumption that perhaps we don't agree upon, that moving off of gas and petroleum and into green energy will cost us more, because actually the research shows once we get started, it will actually cost us less. So we're hoping to be able to move to green energy and the kinds of energy that don't destroy the planet as quickly as possible, because one, then we won't destroy the planet, and two, the pricing will actually go down. Now, is that going to happen this year as gas prices are going up? Clearly not fast enough. So we are facing a crisis of increased costs of gasoline, and everyone analyzes it as being because of Putin and the Russian war in Europe, which I suspect the state Senate R's and D's won't have that much ability to change the storyline in. What we can try to do is lower the costs, particularly for people who are most dependent on using petroleum vehicles, as we have not transitioned fast enough into EV vehicles. So we are proposing in our One House a reduction in the gas tax, 16 cents a gallon in state gas tax, and then the option for the localities to match it with their local sales tax, because sales taxes are usually half state and approximately half locality. So we are proposing that for the remainder of 2022.
President, one quick follow-up question.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. 16 cents, but not 33. We have the chance to cut it to 33, and we're doing 16. People need a break. Costs are escalating. Why not the 33-cent cut?
Every action has a reaction, and we currently use gas tax revenue to pay for the highway maintenance and repairs. So we thought it was not actually the best idea to zero out all the funds going into the highway funds. And so that's why we chose half, but recognizing that the localities could get us to that 33 cents by matching at the local level. And interestingly, because the price of gas is going up, at the local level, the sales tax revenue is growing much larger than any locality imagined it would be or projected in their budget. Because every time the price of gas goes up, they're gaining more from sales tax than they thought they were. So we actually believe it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that we take half that cost and ask them to take half that cost.
Through you, Mr. President, one more question.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Is there anything in any of the proposals in your one House proposal that lowers energy costs for homeowners and businesses in New York State?
So we are offering significant tax credits for retrofitting your home to solar or geothermal. The solar tax credit from $5,000 to $10,000? Yes. We're going to a $10,000 geothermal tax as well, right? $5,000 geothermal. What else? We're incentivizing the use of electric vehicles by providing credits for purchasing electric vehicles or purchasing chargers for electric vehicles. We have a package of climate change proposals that put money into a number of additional retrofits for people, we're not retrofitting people. How about people's homes? Maybe we'd like to retrofit people. I'm not sure how to do that. Retrofitting private homes as well as businesses. So if you have a chance to review our climate package within our One House, including our redefinition of the Bond Act and what that money should be used for, I think you will see quite a few other things that you might not have thought about but would meet those standards.
Mr. President, I'm all set and hope you reset the clock for my
And one more thing,
colleague.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
Please,
sorry.
Mr. President. And there's an
Absolutely.
additional $400 million for utility arrears for people who have not been able to pay their utilities because of the same problems they faced in not being able to pay their rent or their mortgages during COVID.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm all set.
Thank you, Senator Rath. Senator Serino.
412, which is the 2-hour limit, in an effort to be very accommodating. We're going to go till 4:30 and absolutely cut it off at 4:30. So the remaining 4 or 5 members that want to debate, that's how much time you have. If your colleagues go long before you, it's on you.
Thank you, Senator Gianaris. Senator Serino.
I'm going to be lickety-split. Senator Kruger, does the senator yield for questions?
Senator Kruger, do you yield?
Thank you.
Sponsor yields.
Does this one House budget proposal include specific money for research, education, or prevention initiatives for Lyme and tick-borne diseases?
I really don't know. Does someone know and want to run up here? And maybe somebody will let me know.
And as you know, does the sponsor continue?
The sponsor yields.
Yes.
Sorry. And as you know, mental health was a huge subject, right, with all the questions. But with the children's mental health beds, I'm glad to see that we're having that conversation, and it sounds like we're making the investment there and in the stabilization centers as well. And I shared, No, thank you. And I share the concerns that my colleagues had. But there's a proposal that includes $50 million for mental health grants under aid to localities. And I'm just wondering how those are going to be dispersed. Is it going to be by geographically, population, or through like a competitive process?
So it will go through the school districts.
Streamline the process because they can't get bogged down with too much red tape. And then, did they have the answer to the question on Lyme yet? And then I'll just be real quick.
We accepted the executive of $69,400 for Lyme. So I get,
1,400 for Lyme.
thank you.
And I see that the One House proposes an additional.
Senator Serino,
$2 million.
sorry, I know we're going quick, but are you asking the sponsor to yield?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Does the sponsor yield?
Sorry, it's my fault also.
The sponsor yields.
Sorry, Mr. President.
Sorry, I see that the One House proposes an additional $2 million for the long-term care ombudsman program, a program that, of course, plays a critical role in protecting the health and safety of nursing home residents. While that's a start, I submitted a bipartisan letter for $20 million to bolster and professionalize this critical program. Can you tell me why there's been such a small investment made in such a critical program in your proposal?
You're going to get me fired, Sue Serino. I wanted $20 million also. Mr. President, because we didn't have enough money to go around, and we thought it was a great idea, and at least in year one we could get it started, knowing that we're going to need more funds.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Helming,
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield for a few questions?
will the sponsor yield?
Yes, I
The
will.
sponsor yields.
Thanks, Senator Krueger. Senator Krueger, if there's one thing we've learned over the past year is that the ERAP program, it's so bureaucratic, it's very slow, and that both tenants and landlords are suffering. Tenants are falling further behind with their rent payments, and landlords are at risk of losing their property because they can't meet their financial obligations. I look at this One House budget as a great opportunity to streamline the ERAP process and the program. Is there anything in this One House budget that proposes doing just that?
Frustration. We know that we started off slow, moving the money out. We sped it up quite a bit, and I think we've now given out 1.6 of the 2 billion. And we have the dilemma of the difficulty in finding the landlord sometimes, finding the right paperwork. It's amazing how complicated it is. And a lot of it is tied up with the requirements of the federal government and what they tell us we have to collect, which is also why we wanted to make sure we have a state program to invest money in directly to the landlords. And we're continuing that and putting how much money in?
Will the sponsor continue to yield? I
Yes.
believe she was still answering the question. I'm sorry, Senator Helming.
No, that's okay. Go right ahead.
I mean, I would argue every point that you just made, that it is so challenging and difficult to get any answers to specific questions from the commissioner and his agency. But I want to switch quickly because we are so limited in time. Something that's personally very important to me is providing housing for those homeless veterans who are seeking it. In the greater Rochester area, we have a tremendous lack of housing for veterans, especially females, women with children. And I'm wondering if there was any discussion and if this budget includes a restoration of the Warrior Salute program. In the past, they received about $250,000, $300,000, but I believe it was cut out 2 years ago.
Familiar with that program? There has been quite a bit of discussion about needing more funds for homeless people statewide, the recognition that every community is suffering from populations that are homeless. $250 million access program for funding for people who are homeless, so we really upped the amount of money. And I guess what I would suggest is that if you know a group specifically in Rochester that's working with homeless veterans, that we should make sure that they're being reached out to make sure that they know how to apply.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor will continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes,
The sponsor
Mr.
yields.
I will do that, and I ask about the Warrior Salute program because it's so wonderful and successful every year. But just moving along very quickly here, keeping people in their homes is very important. I agree that we have a homelessness issue that needs to be addressed. This includes people who live in state-operated group homes, people with developmental disabilities. Over the weekend, I attended an event with PEF, my colleagues from this body were in attendance as well, and we heard about the dozens of group homes that have been closed since 2019, both permanently and temporarily closed, along with the day treatment programs. Is there anything in this budget that says, that commits to our developmentally disabled population in New York State that we are going to reopen these homes and we're going to stop moving you around like you're pieces of a puzzle instead of the human beings that you are?
So we know that we have a new commissioner for OPWDD, who I think comes to the position with a much better understanding of the real-life issues for families and the real pain if a facility's closed that was working and being successful for their, probably in most cases, adult children, although I guess also children. And there is additional funding for facilities within the O agencies. But I am not aware of the governor making any commitments to reopening specific facilities, and I don't believe we got that far into the weeds in our one house. Is that correct?
Continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Senator
yields.
Krueger, continuing along the same lines, the CDAP program, Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program, this Medicaid program, I know you're familiar with it, provides services to chronically ill or physically disabled individuals who have a medical need. These folks cannot live in their own homes without services. They cannot. We are at a crisis with that program. The Center for Disability Rights is right around the corner from my district office. I hear from people. I met with a woman on Friday, and she had this to say to me. She said, Pam, I'm at the end of the rope. I don't know what to do. She needs 24/7 care. She said, I'm thinking about trying to commit a crime so I could get into jail and get the services that I need. Is there anything in this budget that increases the ability for folks in the CDAP program to increase the wages, to restore benefits to the people who work in those programs?
Yes, one of the major initiatives in our One House bill is increased revenue for salary increases for people who are working in home care, which would include through CPAP as well as through other traditional models. So absolutely, more money for staffing. There was also some changes the state made in the number of CPAP intermediary agencies, and there's some concern about that, and so we sort of slowed that down a bit also within our One House. So invested some money into capital for home care facilities as well, which would actually be more a fit with the previous question you asked about the group homes.
Thank you, Senator Krueger. If the sponsor will yield for one more question.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Changing topics here a little bit. The Gananda Central School District receives significantly less foundation aid per student when it's compared to similar schools. Even wealthier school districts receive almost double what Gananda receives per student. In the past budgets, I've seen carve-outs for schools who have needed additional bump up. Yonkers, Rochester City School District, and others. Is there anything in this budget for the Gananda Central School District? I know they've highlighted their plight to myself, to the chair of the Education Committee, and others.
I don't know them personally, so I'm just going to check with this gentleman. Understanding is everybody got at least a 3% increase in foundation aid base funding, and that you should probably have a chat with the education chair, Shelley Mayer, about what other possibilities there might be.
Through you, Mr. President. Thank you, and that has been done for the last couple of years, and I know the school district has reached out numerous times as well. That does it for my questions. Thank you, Senator Krueger.
Thank you.
Senator Martucci.
Mr. President, my question is with respect to TED Part RR, if the senator would yield.
Senator Krueger, do you yield?
I do, but remind me what Part RR is.
I'll tell you about
Yields.
it. Extended producer responsibility.
staff. That's amazing.
I'm trying to make this more efficient because I've only got 6 minutes left, so I promise I'm going to use it well. All right. My question is with respect to municipalities that currently have recycling programs. If a municipality operates its own recycling program, is it able to opt out of EPR?
It's a new agreement between the producers and the municipalities can opt out.
So if this senator would yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Through you, Mr. President. So if the municipality is able to opt out or chooses for some reason not to opt out, is there anything that is included in the language that's before us today that would somehow protect or dictate what happens to the collectively bargained workforce?
Address collective bargaining. They would have to work that out at home.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I have one other question.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor
yes.
yields.
All right. Thank you, Senator. I'm going to pivot to Part SS, which has to do with the ban on certain packaging. That's part of this proposal as well. Has there been any consideration paid to carve-outs, specific carve-outs with respect to packaging that's used for medical purposes, such as storing of cellular therapies, cryogenics, and even the storage and distribution of vaccines, which we've clearly seen over the past year is pretty important?
Not in the governor's proposal, but apparently the industry has been approaching us as well with concerns about medical packaging. So I think we're very open to learning more about this.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Senator for answering your questions, and I look forward to those conversations in the weeks to come.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Tedisco.
The senator yield for a few questions.
Does the sponsor yield?
Of course.
The sponsor yields.
I'm teasing. I
Thank
know.
you. First of all, let me let you know I checked the drawer for Senator Gianaris' old desk. There's nothing in it today, so I'm not going to be using anything in there, so he can relax. I want to ask you very quickly, what are the two largest spending and revenue parts of this budget? Two largest.
Without even looking, it's education and health care.
Yeah. Or social services, excuse me.
Social services are nothing compared to education and health care.
Okay. Now, you said in one of your comments early on, I think it was with Senator O'Meara, the state is very good at making very large adjustments quickly and effectively. You remember a man named Willie Sutton?
I don't know him personally, but I remember the reference that he would rob banks because that's where the money was.
That's where the money was. Now, I don't know if he really said, excuse me.
Senator Kruger, do you yield?
I do yield.
Senator Kruger yields.
I don't know if he really said that, but they say he really said that. And what I want to ask you is about one time, not so far back, you and I were here, several members were here. We had a terrible deficit, terrible deficit. Must have been some bad budgets leading up to that deficit. And we corrected that deficit. And you probably remember how we corrected that deficit. When I say large amounts and you said education, it was through taking money from education. And when we took that money from education, we developed an unbelievable, terrible gap in providing funding for kids in schools and special educations. And it was a hard process to get back to the point where we actually closed that gap. Would you call that a very good, very large adjustment very quickly to solve a problem?
So, if I had my druthers, no, I would not choose to cut education funding or healthcare funding.
Lee,
Does the sponsor yield?
I certainly do.
The sponsor yields.
so we're not always very good at making large adjustments.
Apparently, we're good at making them. We may not always make the right decisions.
Okay.
But we made the decisions when we had to. Yeah. But I would agree. I don't think that I was the governor that day, or any day, but I don't think that our cutting education funding proved to be a very good move for us.
The senator yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Of course.
The sponsor yields.
Just help me one more time. The difference between the governor's budget and our budget with numbers and percentages of increase. We increased it by percentage, and we've increased it by numbers. What's the percentage and the number?
Increased it by $9 billion over what the governor proposed, and that percentage increase would be 0.1%. 0.1% over the governor's.
Would the gentlewoman yield?
Yeah.
Senator Krueger, do you yield?
I'm sorry, 11.1 over this year's budget, but her proposed budget goes up 3.2%, ours goes up 11.1%.
That'll be the last question, and I'll tell you why. Would you yield?
Yes,
Senator Krueger,
I'm
do you
happy
yield?
to yield.
Last
Sponsor
question,
yields.
I'll tell you why I'm going to ask it, because we have the worst inflation in 40 years. Every dollar, we talked about the gasoline tax and cutting the tax, but it's really the cost of a gallon of gasoline also. Home heating, buying groceries, paying the kids' tuition, paying our car payments, everything is chipping away at every dollar. I want to ask you, the one thing I don't hear a lot about when we're providing all this funding, 11% increase, $9 billion, is the beleaguered property tax owner. Are we doing anything about the STAR program to enhance it and help them out through that? It's been a very good program. I remember when I was in the minority, we fought for it, we helped develop it, we helped get it across, it saved $35 or $40 billion. But when you eat away at all those other things, and I'll tell you why it's important. You've got young people before the pandemic and leading into the pandemic who bought homes. They're looking at their mortgage now. They're looking at their tax payment now, and they're saying, wait a second, I don't think I can afford to keep my house anymore. But above and beyond that, even with the enhanced program, we have seniors who are calling me and saying, I'm on a fixed income. I've been on a fixed income for a long time. Maybe just Social Security, maybe just a very small pension system. I could afford to pay for my house over 45 years, Senator, they're telling me, but I don't think I can keep it now because I can't afford to pay the taxes, even with the STAR program in place. So we talk about regressive taxes. My mom died at 97. She lived for many years. My father worked in the foundry for 30 years to bring up 3 children and to be able to own a home. She lived on Social Security of $12,000 or $13,000 or $14,000 for many, many years. My father passed away at 67. She lived to be 97. Her house had a value. Was it fair to charge her with the fellow next to him who might have been making $100,000 or $200,000 at the General Electric as an executive? It's a terribly regressive tax. Why is there nothing done to enhance that? I'm a little bit interested in helping people out with their heating bills. That's fine, but that's not going to cover the cost of the expansion of the taxes and eating into their small pensions and eating into their small Social Security.
Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Tedesco for that question. We put $2.2 billion into expanding STAR in our one-house budget. We still have $400 million that we put in last year to continue a circuit breaker for exactly this population. So combined, it's $2.6 billion in property tax reductions through STAR and circuit breaker. And we made adjustments to the governor's proposal to target more of it to people who have less than $75,000 in income and people who have, sorry? For people under $75,000, there would be additional $942 in STAR. For people $75,000 to $150,000 in income, an additional $683 in STAR. For people $150,000 to $200,000, an additional $393 in STAR. And for the enhanced program, an additional $800 on top of the existing STAR, on top of the, for those who are eligible, the circuit breaker that we expanded last year and continues into this year. So I'm very proud of my conference's commitment to trying to address exactly what you're describing for exactly that population.
Will the gentlewoman yield?
Senator Tedesco, this will be the last question that we permit. Senator Krueger, do you yield?
Yes, I will.
Now, what
Sorry.
what percentage would that be as compared to what the size of the budget increased? I mean, you said 9% for the budget. What increase would that be to help the homeowners?
In total, $9 billion, but $2.2 billion is going to the new property tax reductions. If you look at the total, not just the general fund, it's a $13 billion increase, of which you've got the $2.2 billion STAR, the $400 million continuing circuit breaker. We also, the gas tax is also relief, we think, for a very similar population of people. We accepted the governor's proposal to accelerate the phase-in of middle-class tax deductions as well. So I actually think we have a very robust package of tax reductions here.
Thank you, Senator Disco. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. Call the roll. Senator Gianaris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the members for their cooperation. Just as a reminder, the rules say a resolution could be debated for 30 minutes. We're now on 2.5 hours, so we've, as I've noted, been very accommodating. As we move into vote explanations, we have a number of members who will be explaining their votes on both sides of the aisle, and I know Mr. President is going to be very strict with the 2-minute vote explanation rule. So just to let all the members know how this is going to go for the next probably over an hour with the number of people on the list. Thank you, Mr. President.
Call the roll again. Call the roll.
Dabo, Janoris Kruger, Ort, Stewart Cousins, White.
As mentioned by Senator Gianaris, pursuant to Rule 9, Section 3, subsection, please, colleagues, kindly but firmly keep your comments 2 minutes. Senator Rivera to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I stated earlier, the most important part here is that we have to think about the fact that for the last 10 years, the budgets have been about disinvestment, about austerity. And so I am happy to say that the governor's budget proposal was a great beginning, but our one-house budget proposal is many, many more steps forward. We talked about some of the things during my debate, but I just wanted to mention a couple more. The bonus language for workers, we modified it to make sure that we include frontline workers. We also make sure that we address the benefits cliff. We repealed the Medicaid global cap, as I said. We increased capital program. So we added an additional $400 million in resources. So we have for hospitals all across the state. And we took 25% of that and we save it for safety net, for set aside for capital funding to be directed to community-based organizations. We want to make sure they don't get left out. We expanded executives' one-year postpartum coverage proposal to include all residents of New York State. We added language to create parity in dispensing fees for pharmacies. Thank you, Senator Skoufis, for that language. We omitted the executive's telehealth parity proposal so we would expand telehealth with a few bills of mine. We enacted fair pay for home care to establish home care worker pay. We did all of these things and this, Mr. President, is because this is what our belief is as to how important taking these steps forward to make sure that we can have the disinvestment and the austerity that we've had for the last decade go back. We want to make sure that we take many steps in the opposite direction. We're doing that today. I'm incredibly happy to vote in the affirmative for this, and that's 1 minute and 32 seconds, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Rivera to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Harckham to explain his vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. New Yorkers all over the state are hurting. And there's a lot of conversation about what this budget does for ordinary New Yorkers. And I would just take a minute to have a slightly different take on one of my colleagues from across the aisle who said this budget had nothing for hardworking New Yorkers. I would suggest the opposite. This budget is all about hardworking New Yorkers, starting with record education funding to lift our children up and hold the line on property taxes, continuing to expand pre-K outside of New York City, record increases in child care so that folks can go back to work. You ask people in businesses, the #1 reason why jobs are open right now is because folks cannot afford safe, affordable child care. And then you put in what we're doing for small businesses, continuing the grant program, the small business tax cut. Let's look at the middle class tax cut. Let's look at the property tax relief that we just spoke about on the floor. So there are many, many things here that I think are very favorable to invest in our families as we come out of the recovery. Finally, I want to point to one other thing. Let's talk about OASIS, which I oversee on the Committee of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. What other agency do we ever remember in this chamber getting a 50% increase in their budget during the budget cycle, which is amazing, but it's one thing to put money into the budget, but if the system is not working for people, we have to change it. And that's why I'm glad colleagues have put in the merger of OASIS and OMH, because 70% of people who present with a substance use disorder also have an underlying mental issue that they are self-medicating for. So there are so many good things in this budget. I appreciate colleagues, the Majority Leader, and our staff, and Senator Krueger for her performance here today on the floor. I vote aye.
Senator Harkins have recorded in the affirmative. Senator Ramos to explain her vote.
Thank you, President, and good afternoon, everyone. I rise to explain my vote in the affirmative. I'm so proud to see us take tremendous steps away from the executive proposal and actually stand up for working class New Yorkers. As the chair of the Labor Committee, I especially want to tout the $50 million in workforce training that we're facilitating, and also $22.5 million to Cornell in order to focus on the Climate Jobs Institute and a cannabis workforce initiative. We also managed to get prevailing wage into the Environmental Bond Act, which is great. I also am happy to see that we were able to build on the Farm Worker Fair Labor Practices Act that I passed in 2019. We're solidifying the path for them to reach a 40-hour work week with guaranteed overtime after that, and some improvements to PERB in order to help create more unions like we've been able to win at Pindar Vineyards in Suffolk County. I also want to, of course, talk a little bit about childcare. As a mom, I made this a priority of mine during this budget cycle, and so much of the work that you and I have done, President, on this bill actually has made it into this budget. We're finally eliminating the work requirement for New Yorkers to be able to qualify for childcare, including for our undocumented neighbors, and we're covering children 5 and below as we continue to roll out universal pre-K without a gap in between 4 and 5-year-olds, which is really important in keeping kids safe. Of course, helping parents return back into the back into the workforce, and helping our child care providers, which I still think we should have created a wage floor for them, and that's something we're going to continue to fight for. But all that being said, I believe that as we talk about a just recovery for all, really as communities of color, and especially women of color, we know what it's like to get one bite at the apple and still leave so many needs unmet. So with no solutions for excluded workers and no guarantee for a living wage for childcare workers, it actually does leave a lot of work for us to do. But I want to thank our Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, all of the advocates, my staff, Central staff, and everybody that has worked on this document. I'm very proud to vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Senator Ramos will be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Ryan to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. As we rebuild our economy post-pandemic, we are passing our one-house budget resolution today that makes investment in the people of the state of New York. Lots of good news for the people. $3 billion in child care, historic investment. $1.4 billion to keep helping landlords and renters. And as we accelerate our middle-class tax cuts, we're going to put more money into people's pockets. The budget takes action to lower the cost of living for New Yorkers during this difficult economic time. As chair of the Libraries Committee, I'm excited to say our budget increases funding for our library construction fund to $45 million. That's money that'll hit the street and hit our communities quickly. We'll also allow libraries across New York State to get going on these capital projects that have been backed up. And with the dire situation we're seeing around the world right now, very thankful to see a $7 million increase and money to help refugees resettle in America. We hope for peace in the world, but we're often let down by that. And when people are displaced, the people of New York State will be ready to help those displaced. We made a big investment in broadband. We included in the budget my legislation called the Wired Broadband Act. It's a good piece of legislation. It's a comprehensive plan to utilize federal and state funding in a manner that's both efficient and transparent, and will deliver a product that we can be proud of to the people of New York State. The proposal includes labor standards that will ensure the creation of good paying jobs in the fiber and broadband development fields. It includes prevailing rate, WMBB requirements, and other critical safeguards. And as we connect more people to broadband, we must do it in a responsible way that creates good paying jobs. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the leader for her help throughout this process, and to compliment Senator Krueger for the many hours that she spent on marathon Zoom calls to put together this budget. I really couldn't believe how you stuck to all those hearings. And of course, to our staff who works tirelessly throughout the year, especially during budget year. Thank you very much.
Senator Ryan to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Lieu to explain his vote.
President, I am so proud to be part of this Senate resolution about this budget. You know, last year, for the very first time, we fulfilled a court mandate to fully fund school aid for our primary and secondary schools throughout the state of New York, an historic 3-year arrangement that we are making good on the second year thereof. And next year, I fully expect that we will continue to follow through. Also, following through on a commitment to expand pre-kindergarten statewide. This year, we expand on that commitment to education and our state's future by investing a historic $1.1 billion for public universities in the state of New York, split between SUNY and CUNY. This money will provide, at long last, sufficient funding to recruit and retain a significant number of new full-time faculty members for our public universities, increase the pay for adjunct professors who we rely upon immensely, and perhaps most importantly, eliminate these ridiculous fees that our students have had to suffer under for many years, as well as beginning to reduce the tuition that they are forced to pay. As we know, for many years now, at least 2 decades, the state has reduced its share of operating aid for our public universities, relying more and more on student tuition. We need to start reversing that now. And one other note, you know, just over the weekend, a woman, a 67-year-old woman in Yonkers, was pummeled 125 times, punched by a perpetrator who called her an Asian witch, but with a B, and spat on her and descended on her like, who knows? This is yet another instance of anti-Asian hate. I'm so proud that this Senate is supporting the AAPI equity budget that will finally provide that kind of support to the growing Asian American Pacific Islander community we have throughout the state of New York, so that people in our community will not be as vulnerable as they have been. Granted, this is just a Senate budget resolution. I look forward to fighting for it in the final budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lewis to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Bridgeport to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you to my colleagues, to the Senate's central staff, and especially to our leader for all their work and diligence in drafting this budget resolution. Colleagues, as our state continues to have the highest wealth inequality in the nation, a great many of our constituents are wondering how they will keep their heads above water. I am frustrated that this resolution raises no additional revenue from the ultra-rich, who should be required to contribute their fair share towards addressing these dark and difficult times. I am nevertheless heartened by some truly crucial measures we have been fighting for here, including fair pay for home care workers, a new deal for CUNY, as well as the elimination of the 421A boondoggle for wealthy developers. As the chair of the Committee on Children and Families, I have been especially focused on the child care crisis facing New York. For 10 weeks, I toured our state listening to parents and child care providers share input on the situation, and many of you joined me. With remarkable consistency, what we heard was this: in every corner of our state, in rural farming communities, in suburban townships, in dense cities, the childcare industry is collapsing. Chronic underfunding and reliance upon the unpaid and underpaid labor of childcare providers, especially Black women and women of color, has led us to this crisis. As one childcare educator said, when you take something for granted long enough, it will soon disappear. That is exactly what's happening, and it's happening fast. I believe this resolution could go further in addressing this crisis. However, I am proud that it devotes billions of badly needed dollars toward childcare, and that it starts us on the process of finally building a universal childcare system. If we are to stop the rapid collapse of the childcare sector, upon which our entire economy rests, we cannot allow the governor to remove or delay even $1 of this funding in the final budget. I thank the leader for including it and urge her to protect every last dollar of it as though our families, our economy, and the very future of our state depend on it, because they most certainly do. I vote aye on this resolution.
Senator Brisport to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Mayer to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I proudly vote aye on this resolution, and I want to thank Majority Leader Stewart-Cousins and Senator Krueger for her leadership. You know, as the chair of education, I've been around the state and spoken to superintendents upstate, downstate, and of course the city of New York, our suburban communities, our rural communities, and our urban communities outside New York City. And universally, there are two takeaways. One, they're incredibly grateful that we started the commitment to full funding of Foundation Aid and that we are continuing. And two, they're terribly worried about their students as they return to school after the challenges of COVID. And to the credit of my colleagues, we are addressing both of those things. We are in the second year of our commitment to fully funding Foundation Aid. We are building on our commitment to universal pre-K outside New York City. We are investing in career and technical education. We are ensuring that our special ed schools get the money that they deserve. They are basically public schools in different settings. They are entitled to the money of our public schools. But most important, we are recognizing that the mental health, the social and emotional health of our children must be addressed as they recover from COVID, and we are investing in it in a creative and bold way. I also want to say that we are dealing with climate change in the school context by acknowledging the need to move to EV vehicles for our schools, but working with the stakeholders to make it work. And coupled with our investment in childcare and an investment in higher ed in SUNY and CUNY, we are recognizing the state's obligation from infancy to graduation and beyond, that education is the power to give every child the opportunity to achieve their dreams and their ambitions. When we see what is happening in the rest of the world, we cannot forget the power of our democracy and the power of education to transform a life into independence and self-determination. For that reason, I vote aye.
Senator Mayer to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Oberacker to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Governor Hochul's proposed budget included record spending, but that was a bargain compared to the plan being advanced by the Senate majority that adds another $9 billion inflating overall state spending to a nearly $225 billion budget. There are positives in this budget that will pay immediate dividends across the state that I can support. Repeal of the fiber optic right-of-way tax that is stifling broadband expansion. Additional funding for CHIPS to help fund local roads and improvements. And the accelerated phase-in of the middle-class tax cut. However, the overall amount of the spending is unsustainable and tax hikes are inevitable. The budget blows through reserve funds at an unsustainable rate and will leave our state in a highly precarious financial position going forward. This is the very definition of an election year budget and is not fiscally responsible. New York is losing population at a record rate, and if Albany fails to make major changes to this out-of-control spending plan, more people will be on their way out because no one wants to be here when that bill comes due. And for that reason, Mr. President, I am voting in the negative. Thank you.
Senator Obaraca to be recorded in the negative. Senator Wyke to explain her vote.
Mr. President, in reading this one House resolution, it is disappointing to me that the bill does not include language to address any of the changes to bail reform law. It does nothing to address the changes to discovery reform law. This proposal does nothing to provide judges with discretion when it comes to setting bail for dangerous defendants, a proposal several of my colleagues and New York City Mayor Adams all advocated for. And finally, I can only hope that the final budget, this proposal does nothing to collect data to study the impact of bail reform on public safety. And finally, I can only hope that the final budget will include changes to bail reform and discovery laws, as we saw were so important to New Yorkers in last November's election, when they vehemently expressed their disgust that they are not being protected and that they have no rights and that criminals are being put before victims. And for that reason, I vote in the negative.
Senator White to be recorded in the negative. Senator Brooke to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. This budget resolution invests in our future, in our families, in working people, and in care for our most vulnerable residents. In speaking with the residents of my district in the Rochester area, I hear the same stories whether they live in a city, in the suburbs, or in a more rural part of upstate. People are looking for certainty. They're looking for support. They're looking for hope. This budget resolution invests in hope for our future. We're making historic investments in childcare because as a society, we have finally acknowledged that quality, reliable childcare is economic development and that no state can thrive without it. In Monroe County, we have thousands of job openings that can't be filled until parents have a safe, reliable, and affordable place to send their children. Today, this resolution creates that for them. The Senate budget also invests in older children through expansion of our career and technical education programs. These CTE programs provide academic and technical instruction that will prepare our young people for real-world jobs right here in New York State. This budget expands funding so that we can recruit and retain quality instructors and so that no longer students will have months-long wait lists to join these programs. And finally, not to be forgotten, once again, this Senate has kept its promise to equitably fund public schools by continuing to invest in foundation aid. This budget resolution does so much to support New Yorkers in need. And as chair of the Senate Committee on Mental Health, I'd be remiss to not mention the historic investments we are making to support New Yorkers' mental health needs. For too long, under the leadership of a previous administration, New York dismantled its mental health care system. We closed inpatient treatment beds. We failed to invest in community-based programs. And we systematically underpaid our workers. Today, we reverse that course. I'm proud that this budget includes a historic $22 million increase to restore 200 inpatient mental health beds. And that after decades of minuscule investment, this Senate gives mental health workers not 1, but 2 years of cost of living increases of 5.4% each year. I want to again thank all of the advocates, the staff, and especially our Senate leadership for their tireless work in getting us to this place. And I look forward to making sure as much as possible of this resolution is enacted in our final budget. And I vote aye. Thank you.
Senator Brooke to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator May to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am beaming because fair pay for home care is in the Senate One House budget. I am so grateful to the Majority Leader for being an early and consistent champion, and to my colleagues for recognizing just how crucial it is to support home care workers. Shout out to the Caring Majority, AARP, 1199, and all the tireless and creative advocates who've made sure everyone knows we need a robust home care system to keep older and disabled New Yorkers healthy and safe at home, and that it's a good use of taxpayer dollars with a very high return on investment. But especially I want to thank the home care workers themselves who have been doing the work for years out of dedication and love, even though they struggle to pay the rent, buy gas, and put food on the table. To the family members who have given up your jobs to care for a loved one, our One House supports home care, but it also supports a tax credit to recognize your sacrifices. Let me finish with a special appreciation of my constituents, Michelle Spady and Sally Johnston. Without Michelle, Sally wouldn't be able to get out of bed and into her wheelchair each day, let alone have baths, healthy meals, or fresh air. Michelle is there for Sally through snow and rain, no matter what issues she might face in her own life. With this One House resolution, the Senate resoundingly says to you, Sally, you deserve adequate care in your home. And you, Michelle, deserve the dignity of a living wage. I proudly vote aye.
Senator May to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Skoufis to explain his vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I also want to extend my gratitude to the Majority Leader as well as Senator Krueger for getting us to this point. Heading into this process, I felt strongly that this needs to be a budget that addressed the kitchen table issues that our families across New York State have been facing. And at a time when paychecks are not going as far as they used to, and a time when people are paying more at the gas pump, and a time when we're coming out of a pandemic, and a time when kids are getting back into the classroom after virtual learning the past couple of years, this was our time as legislators to put together a budget that addressed those core issues. And we've done that. And so if you're interested in a budget that cuts property taxes for middle-class families, this is your budget. If you're interested in a budget that cuts income tax rates for our middle-class families, this is your budget. If you're a small business owner looking for some relief, this is a budget that cuts small business taxes. If you're one of the millions of New Yorkers who's paying through the nose at the pump, this budget provides relief through a gas tax holiday. If you're one of the many, many New Yorkers who looks at the subsidies and the giveaways that are thrown around to the tune of billions of dollars every year while you are working day and night to pay your bills, finally, this One House budget addresses that, and we will audit every tax incentive that flows through ESD that has to date been held unaccountable. If you are one of the millions of New Yorkers who's been looking on, wonderful UPK program, where's mine? This budget addresses that too, with a dramatic expansion of universal pre-K throughout New York State. As my good colleague and friend just noted, a dramatic investment in home care, a dramatic investment in child care. Finally, this has been a pet issue of mine, finally, this One House budget takes a hard look at and addresses the FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology issue that's been ripping off the suburbs for decades now. And I also want to thank Senator Serrano and leadership for a significant investment in our Parks Capital line, which is crucially important to getting a number of Hudson Valley improvements and projects across the finish line this year. I vote aye because this is a One House budget that is put on the kitchen tables of every single middle class and working class family in the state. And I thank my colleagues and leadership for helping get that done.
Senator Skoufis to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Boyle to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. To explain my vote, Senator Skoufis, I agree with the FIT provision, but that's about it in this bill. New York State is the fourth largest state by population. California is like another country, and Texas and Florida, and then New York, obviously. This budget proposal by the majority is larger than the state budgets of Texas and Florida combined. To put it in some perspective, this spends approximately, or proposes $225 billion. I was elected in 1994 to the Assembly. The state budget that year was $32 billion. One political lifetime, we're talking more than $200 billion, way, way beyond the rate of inflation, I can tell you that much. Because we're spending this much, we're taxing this much. People are fleeing our state. That's why Texas, California, and Florida have more people than we do, because a lot of our residents are leaving, moving there. We cannot afford this rate of spending. I'm voting the negative.
Senator Boyle to be recorded in the negative. Senator Hinchey to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. As one of the senators representing upstate communities and upstate areas, I am incredibly proud that this budget resolution brings real equity to our upstate areas. From historic investments in rural and upstate housing, including the development of small rental units, something that we don't talk about, has not been funded, I don't think, ever in the history of our budgets, to expanding pre-K across our entire state, to arts funding outside of New York City, to modernizing our EMS services, which are crucial lifelines to the communities in our rural areas, to expanding fair pay or securing fair pay for home care. Most of our communities in upstate New York do not have access to home care workers because of the low pay that they are given. To record road funding and road infrastructure, to broadband funding, including my legislation to repeal the right-of-way fee, to historic SUNY funding so that students in upstate areas and upstate colleges get real equity in education, to also property tax relief for homeowners and working families and middle-class families across our state. This is a budget that we can all be proud of, because every person, no matter where you live across New York State, is going to see real, tangible impacts that will better their lives for the future. I want to thank the Majority Leader. I want to thank Senator Krueger, all of the staff, and everyone who has had a hand in creating this budget resolution, sending a full signal that no matter where you live, if you live in New York City, if you live in rural communities, or you live in suburban communities, this is a budget resolution that speaks to you. For that, I vote aye. Thank you.
Senator Hinchey to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Borrello to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 minutes is a short time to discuss something as large as this one-house budget, but I'll give it a shot here. You know, there's good things and bad things, quite frankly, in this one-house budget. Good things like finally repealing the tax on fiber optic cable that the majority put in place 2 years ago and has killed projects across New York State and really set us back more than 2 years in rural broadband. It's eerily similar not only to the legislation of Senator Hinchey, which I also co-sponsored, but the bill that I've had in place with Senator Helming for well over a year. So we should have done this a long time ago. So good and bad. We had an interesting addition of quarterly disbursements of a overtime tax credit for our farmers. But the problem is we actually don't even know what this program is going to be, what it's going to require. So the good part is, yes, quarterly would be great. The bad part is we have no idea what strings will be attached to that. And finally, we are continuing to ignore the $9.3 billion deficit we have in our unemployment insurance fund. 32 other states have committed their federal funds to filling that hole. And we're just continuing to kick that can down the road, unfortunately. So we're ignoring $9 billion we owe and spending $9 billion more. That's an $18 billion swing in this one-house budget as far as I'm concerned. But what really is happening here is that we are exhausting all the federal money, that one-shot money, and in essence creating recurring programs. Those bills are going to come due. And while I would love to sit here and vote one at a time at all the things that I think are good and bad in this one-house budget, I only get one vote. And therefore, the responsible vote is to vote no. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Borrello to be recorded in the negative. Senator Rath to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have grave concerns with this budget resolution today. The overspending continues in New York State to the tune of 23% this year. We actually were here last year as well, and I had the same concerns. This type of out-of-control spending is totally unsustainable. To be honest with you, and to be honest with all of my colleagues, I don't think spending is ever going to be cut from the New York State budget. So at the rate in which we are spending money in our state, I think New Yorkers can expect a steep increase in taxes at some point in the future. This year, the state is fortunate to have a great deal of one-time revenues. One-time revenues that are not being appropriately spent or effectively spent across our state. Instead of these one-time revenues being spent on investments They're being spent on recurring expenses. Recurring expenses, and that's something that is fiscally irresponsible. We should be using these revenues to address key issues in New York State and make critical infrastructure investments, things like rural broadband, which affects dozens and dozens of districts across New York State. Despite this increase, this massive increase in spending year over year, many upstate initiatives are simply forgotten or passed over. With so much new spending, it is hard to imagine that there is so little being done in this budget to lower residents' costs. In fact, I would argue that many of the policies outlined in today's proposal will actually increase energy costs as well as other costs on the residents and the businesses of our great state. I have said this many times. New York has an affordability crisis, and this budget does nothing to remedy that affordability crisis. In closing, it was said earlier today that this one-house proposal was crafted with hope and intelligence. Although that sounds very nice, New Yorkers need a proposal that is crafted with confidence and vision. Confidence and vision for the people of the state of New York. That's what they need out of the state Senate and out of the state legislature. For these reasons, I'll be voting in the negative. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Raff to be recorded in the negative. Senator Stavisky to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first, obviously, we have to thank our majority leader, Senator Stewart Cousins, and Senator Krueger for leading us and answering the questions and being our representative at the hearings. In 2011, I was sitting on the other side, and the state provided 46% of the cost of higher education. 46%. Last year, it was 32%. And this budget finally reverses that trend. It took 10 years, 11 years, it's really taken a lot longer. But there's been a deliberate disinvestment, underfunding of higher education, and this budget reverses that trend. For example, we're providing funding for CUNY and SUNY, for the community colleges, for the opportunity programs. For those of you who represent independent colleges, we're providing Bundy Aid, which goes for scholarships and capital construction, HECAP construction money. We're closing the TAP gap. Last year we said we'll do it in 4 years. This year we're closing it totally. We are closing the TAP gap. We're increasing the operating aid, and we are trying to help the SUNY hospitals because they have serious, serious problems. We are paying the debt on their loans. Every other state agency has their debt paid for them. The $67 million that we're investing here will help the SUNY hospitals thrive. And this is a budget that I think we can be proud of. Proud. It's a budget that is fair. It applies justice for all. So, Mr. President, welcome back to our home, and I vote aye.
Senator Stavisky to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Jackson to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues, I rise in support of the One House resolution. And let me tell you what the most important thing for myself and my constituents. Their safety and security is number one. And I say to you, addressing gun violence in our state and our municipalities is extremely important to me and everyone else that I know. Dealing with the mental health issues. We see it all in the paper, hear it on the radio, on the news. Absolutely must get it under control. But I thank the leadership in this House for bringing forward the continuation of foundation aid for all schools, not only in New York City, but the entire state of New York. Child care for all. That is universal, and we need to have it. And we're dealing with the whole issue of health care. CUNY, SUNY, come on, you know what it is. Turn on the tap to make sure, as Toby Stavisky mentioned, we talked about addressing climate justice. We can't wait for 2050. We must deal with that now. And fair pay for home care. I say it loud and clear because that's how important it is. People are screaming for this. And not only that, but we talk about $5 million for PERB, the Public Employment Relations Board, in order to deal with the 1950, you have to file in paper instead of filing on the internet. Come on, this is 2020, not 1950. We need to address the issues of the farm workers and filing their papers and have people and professionals there that can speak in the primary language that most of the farm workers speak in, Spanish, broadband, and so much more. And let me just say, we can't wait. The time is now. I thank everyone for being involved with this, from the leadership on down, hearing my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, hearing my colleagues here, but there's a lot more that we have to do, and this is it right now. Thank you. I vote aye, Mr. President.
Senator Jackson to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Reichlin-Melnick to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, budgets are an expression of priorities. And this budget expresses the clear priority of the Senate that the state of New York needs to be a place that works for everybody and not just those who are wealthy or well-connected. So I'm proud to vote aye on this budget, and I want to thank the leader and Senator Krueger and all of the staff who put their time and effort into working to make this a budget that we can all be proud of, because this is a budget that will work for regular New Yorkers. We're finally fulfilling our commitment to fund our education systems, from pre-K through K-12 education with a phase-in of foundation aid, all the way up to our colleges and our community colleges. That is so important as we try to build a state that's going to work for everybody. It's also a budget that delivers real property tax relief to millions of New Yorkers through a $2.2 billion investment into property tax relief this year, on top of the circuit breaker program that we've already got from last year's budget. And brings back income tax relief, accelerates that relief. Because at a time when New Yorkers are facing ever-escalating costs because of inflation, we know we need to take action. That's why the budget also includes a partial suspension of the gas tax from May 1st to December 31st, because we know that people are feeling the pain at the pump, and the ones who can least afford to pay that are the working New Yorkers who are struggling to make ends meet. And so we are taking action on that. And at the same time, we're looking to our future. We're raising the Environmental Bond Act proposed by the governor up to $6 billion, because we know that if we don't take action on climate change now and spend that money, we're going to be paying far more down the line as the costs mount from that. And so of that $6 billion, $4 billion of it is set aside to help combat the imminent dangers from climate change. So we're proud of those investments, and we're proud of investments in the bread and butter stuff that we're doing for our local governments, increasing AIM funding to local governments for the first time in so long. That's going to help our communities. It's going to help our taxpayers, who are going to see some of the burden taken off local taxpayers now that the state is stepping up its support. So for all of these reasons, Mr. President, I am proud to support this budget and thank the majority leader for putting it forward.
Senator Reichlin-Melnick to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Hoylman to explain his vote.
Mr. President, I rise in support of the Senate One House resolution on the budget. First, like my colleagues, I want to thank Leader Andrew Stewart-Cousins for setting forth the priorities here, and of course, Senator Krueger for her thoughtful and focused defense of this budget resolution. You know, I want to make 2 points. One is that budgets are also moral documents, and I think this One House resolution reflects the moral imperative we have as public officials to really look after those who need help the most, the very young, our seniors, immigrants, the homeless. And the budget does that with all the investments that you've heard today. Secondly, I want to thank the advocates, the hundreds of advocates, Mr. President, who met us, not in person always, but sometimes on Zoom, to make their priorities clear. I think this exercise is so emblematic of what representative democracy is about. And I want to thank my colleagues for hearing so many voices, even at the last minute, to make sure that their important needs were reflected in the Senate One House. So, Mr. President, I couldn't be more proud to vote aye.
Senator Hoylman to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Gennardis to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know we've heard from lots of our colleagues this afternoon about how proud they are about this One House resolution and how bold and transformative it'll be for the lives of New Yorkers. And I want to add my voice to that chorus, because what we are doing in this document truly is incredible. I mean, we could spend days unpacking this resolution and talk about all the great things in there, but what I want to focus on is the transformative investments into CUNY and SUNY that we are making. We have been talking for a long time about the need to reverse decades of divestment and defunding of our public institutions of higher education, and this budget is going to really reverse those trends and give CUNY and SUNY the new deal that they so desperately deserve. I mean, over the last decade, a 20% cut in state support for these institutions. We've heard from students who have to choose between paying for textbooks or putting a meal on their table. This will help stop that trend from happening. I'm also incredibly excited about our bold child care proposal. As a father of a 14-month-old, I know firsthand the impact that having quality, affordable child care has been on my family, and I know the impact this will have on millions of families across the state. Truly a remarkable thing that we can be advancing in this One House budget resolution, and I know that all of my colleagues are going to be joining together to fight to make sure that that makes it into our final enacted budget. I can go on and on, Mr. President, but I just want to say that this is a great document, it's a great statement of our values, and it's a great day for New York if we can advance this through to the final budget. Thank you.
Senator Gennard is to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Cooney to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. So many wonderful things have been said by my colleagues today, and I can't recount all of them, but I want to emphasize something on behalf of the many cities, towns, and villages outside of the great city of New York. And that is our historic and record investment by increasing the aid to municipalities, or unrestricted operating aid, by $210 million for the first time since 2009. What does that do? Well, as someone who came from local government, I know many of my colleagues also started their careers in public service and local government. What this means is that city halls across New York State can focus on things like keeping libraries open a little bit longer, making sure that we have summer jobs for youth across New York State, making sure that our local law enforcement officers and EMS groups have operating dollars to keep us safe, making sure that this summer we're going to have a wonderful summer with time in the pool and lifeguards to take care of our youngest swimmers. That's what this investment does. It invests in the quality of life that we have in cities across New York State. And we've gone without for 13 years. But this Senate says that stops now. Now, this is a one-time investment in these cities. So we need to think bigger, we need to think creatively going forward. But I want to thank our majority leader, I want to thank our masterful Senate Finance Chair, Liz Krueger, to make sure that these conversations continue moving forward, and I look forward to being part of those conversations. Thank you. I vote in the affirmative.
Senator Cooney to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Kavanaugh to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in support of this resolution. I join my colleagues in thanking our leader, Andrew Stewart-Cousins, our great Finance Chair, Liz Krueger, and especially all of the staff who've labored long and hard over this document for the past more than a month now. I join my colleagues in recognizing the many wonderful achievements of this resolution, and also those who have said that we need to work hard in the next few weeks to make sure that these achievements are delivered in the enacted budget. Especially pleased that we're following through on our commitments on K-12 education from last year and continuing to meet our obligations to do that equitably with lots of state funding. I'm very proud to see that we're funding the new deal for both SUNY and CUNY, including the Borough of Manhattan Community College in my district. Very great that to see that we're doing $625 million for fair pay for home care, including a base wage for home care workers, and very proud that we're including for the first time health care for people, primary health care for people who have been excluded from existing programs because of their immigration status. And of course, $6 billion in the Environmental Bond Act and the All-Electric Building Act, which is a bill that I've put forward, are also included here and are great steps forward. I just want to note, there hasn't been a lot of talk about housing today, and as the housing chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that this budget really is historic from the perspective of housing. We started with a really transformative proposal from the governor of $4.7 billion capital plan, and we are improving upon it in the way that Senator Hinchey talked about before, some great investments in rural and small town and village programs that will really help house folks there. We are following through on our now 2-year-long effort to blunt the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic with $1 billion to backstop the emergency rental assistance program, with $250 million for the landlord rental assistance program, and with $500 million in new money for the homeowner assistance program. We are also funding for the first time a brand new program looking forward, the Housing Access Voucher Program, which will ultimately be the most effective way we can end homelessness, which ought to be our goal, and make sure that we're keeping people in good, safe, permanent housing. We've got funding for code compliance. We've got funding for a brand new community land trust acquisition fund. The list goes on, but again, I am very proud that we're taking this step forward. This is arguably the best budget that this state has put forward for housing in decades, and I'm very honored to support it today. Thank you.
Senator Kavanaugh to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Gianaris to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am proud to stand up and support this budget proposal, which fulfills the promise of New York values: universal child care, a new deal for CUNY and SUNY, pre-K that's expanded across the state, continuing to increase funding for our schools, health care coverage for all, more protections for our tenants in this state. Make no mistake, this is a budget that is a love letter to the working people of this state, who have been suffering for years due to disinvestment and lack of investment in the important priorities that they need. And as we sit here encouraging people to get back to work, encouraging people to get back to their offices after the pandemic, providing the support people need to make that happen is going to benefit all of this state. And to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are against this, I would simply ask, what are they voting against? They don't even have the usual canard that we're raising taxes on too many people, because we're not raising taxes in this budget. Never mind that those who have profited greatly during the pandemic should be asked to pay more. We have the money where that's not even called for in this budget right now. And so those who are against universal child care, more money for our institutions of both lower and higher education, greater health care coverage for the people we represent, what exactly are you voting against? I proudly support this proposal. I thank Leader Stewart-Cousins. I thank our finance chair, Senator Krueger, and all my colleagues who participated in crafting what is a tremendous proposal, one of the best budget proposals I've seen in all my years in the Senate. I proudly vote in the affirmative, Mr. President.
Senator Gianaris to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Krueger to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I did talk quite a bit about this resolution today, but I'm really standing up to say thank you to all my colleagues, because this resolution grows out of weeks and weeks of budget hearings where we sat and we listened to the people of New York State and we heard what they were telling us and what we needed to do for them. And then weeks and weeks of work with my chairs and with working groups and with the staff, trying to fine-tune what was realistic that we could do, what was aspirational that we might not accomplish in year one, but that we needed to shift the focus of how we were spending our money in New York State. And so I am incredibly proud of this piece of work, which is the beginning bell for three-way negotiations for a final budget, but is also a reflection of the goals and the hopes and the dreams of 20 million New Yorkers who tried to contact us to let us know what they needed. And I've also been here for 20 years now, Mr. President, and I watched when I came in and George Pataki was the governor, and we would have budgets that we couldn't possibly afford, but the Republicans had a philosophy of borrow and spend, borrow and spend. And then Democrats came back into power, and we were accused of taxing and spending. But if you tax and spend, at least you're paying for what you're buying, as opposed to leaving it to the next generation. So I don't mind when they tell me I'm a tax and spend Democrat, because I'd rather tax and pay for it than borrow and leave it to the next generations to deal with it. And then we ended up in periods where we just had borrowed so much from previous years that we had to reduce our budgets to levels that were really unsustainable to meet the needs of New Yorkers. So it does appear to be big jumps this year, but I'm telling you, we have the money to do it, and we're not stealing from our reserves. We're actually increasing our reserves at the same time as we are increasing our spending, and we're cutting taxes, as was discussed on the floor today, property taxes, income taxes, gas taxes, while we're making investments in the people of New York who need our help the most. And you know what, Mr. President? That will be returned to us tenfold by a future that New York can be proud of, a future that your beautiful daughters can participate in as they grow up to be adults and become taxpayers in our society, and a state where people will want to come and stay and start business and do businesses. So I'm very proud of what this resolution represents, and I am so honored that our leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, gave me the position of finance chair so that I could try to work to pull it all together for all of us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Krueger to be recorded in the affirmative. Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins to close.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I was just listening to our great finance chair, Senator Krueger, say how pleased she was that she has this responsibility. That's not what she says. Little moment of truth here. but because at the end of all of what we do, we are able to stand here because of the work that you do, Senator Krueger, and your great staff, because of the work that my deputy, Senator Gianaris, continues to do. An incredible conference that is working for New York every single day. Because of that work, because of our staff, because of Chantel Smith and Eric Katz and council and David Friedfeld and the finance staff, because of Loren and the external affairs and Murphy and communications, because of all of us who understand that we stand here on behalf of the people of New York, and even the moments that it takes to get through this, and certainly to my colleagues on the other side as well for the staff and the work that they do, the time that it takes to get to this moment where we can say we have a one-house budget that reflects the priorities of this entire state is well worth it. I want to thank the governor as well, because we started from a place that we don't normally start from. And while we were going back and forth about what's happening in this budget, the fact of the matter is that we started from a place that honored what we'd learned from what we've been dealing with in the past 2 years with this pandemic. We all understood, and that's what we understood last year and the year before, where the breakage was in our compact as government to the people that we serve. It was exacerbated by a pandemic that left us socially isolated, emotionally fragile, economically encumbered, and we got a chance to look firsthand at where the fissures were and what could we do. And we began that repair work. And we began it going from our pre-K investment to our foundation aid investment to our investment in our environment to investment in higher education. We did transportation, we did housing. We continue to look at the infrastructure of the people so that when we do come back to a place where we can get back to our jobs and get back to our work, we're not still suffering from the same uncertainties that we know exists. So that's why we invested record amounts in childcare in this one House budget. And that's why we decided that we would indeed expedite the middle class tax credits, that we would find our way to making sure that those who are caring for our most vulnerable are actually compensated properly, our home care workers. We wanted to make sure that as we are addressing what has happened in our communities all over the state, that we find a way to make sure that people have what they need. And that includes this mental health investment that we know has to happen. I mean, people are talking about a rise in crime in so many communities, including Westchester. There actually has been a decline in crime. But the fact of the matter is that any crime is too much. But we have to take a look at what we can do to make sure that we are addressing the needs properly. And that's why we've gone in with mental health, again, ensuring mental health, giving proper beds, recreating more sustainable, supportive housing, looking at how we deal with after school, community school, investing in gun violence prevention programs. We are hitting so many of the things that we know will make New York stronger and more economically viable and be able to support every single person in New York. When we talk about our small businesses, when we talk about looking at abating taxes, even at the gas pump, we are continually to make New York a better place to be. So this is, and I heard somebody say this is aspirational, yes. But it's aspirational not for us. It's not aspirational for the people who have worked so hard to make sure that people's needs are met. It's aspirational for the people of New York State because they want to make sure that as their taxes are down, as their communities are made safer, that we are doing and addressing what they need, not only now, but in the future. And yes, it's going to take more money. But the fact of the matter is, we've disinvested in our hospitals. We've disinvested in our transportation system. We've disinvested in our roads. We've disinvested in education. We've disinvested in our children. We've disinvested in the supports that people need when things get rough in their lives. We've disinvested for decades. And so today, we stand and we say, we are reinvesting in the people of New York. We are reinvesting in a future. We are reinvesting in an ideal that New York will continue to be progressive. It will continue to be pragmatic. It will continue to lead the way, not only in this recovery, but in advancing what we as government can do with our people and for our people. I vote aye.
Majority Leader Stewart-Cousins to be recorded in the affirmative. Announce the results.
In relation to Senate Resolution 2081, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Akshar, Borrello, Boyle, Gallivan, Griffo, Helming, Jordan, Lanza, Martucci, Matera, Oberacker, O'Mara, Ort, Palumbo, Rath, Ritchie, Sereno, Steck, Tedisco, and White. Ayes 43, nays 20.
The resolution is adopted. Senator Gianaris.
Mr. President, if we could briefly return back to motions and resolutions. On behalf of Senator Savino, on page 39, I offer the following amendments to Calendar 657, Senate 5768, and ask that said bill retain its place on third reading calendar.
Amendments are received and the bill takes its place on the third reading calendar.
Is there any further business at the desk?
There is no further business at the desk.
Move to adjourn until tomorrow, Tuesday, March 15th at 11 a.m.
On motion, the Senate stands adjourned until Tuesday, March 15th at 11 a.m.